I overheard my daughter-in-law tell the security guard that my wife was not important right at the gate packed with the city's elite guests. She did not whisper it. She said it with a laugh, a dismissive wave of her manicured hand that erased 40 years of our existence in a single second. When she turned away with that cold smile, satisfied that she had put us in our place, I saw my wife Coretta slowly open her old worn handbag. It was a bag Victoria had made fun of for years. But what Coretta pulled out of it was not a tissue or a mint. It was a piece of metal that weighed more than Victoria's entire social reputation. And as my wife handed it to the guard, I watched my daughter-in-law's face begin to change, freezing in a mask of absolute terror. My name is Augustus Freeman. I am 70 years old, and for the last 10 years I have let my family believe a lie. To my son Terrence and his wife Victoria, I am just a retired truck driver, living on a pension that barely covers the electric bill. They see my calloused hands, my gray hair, and my rusted Ford pickup truck, and they see failure. They see a man who has nothing to offer them but his silence. They never asked about the years before I retired. They never asked about the logistics empire I built from a single delivery van into a fleet that crosses 3 continents. They never asked, so I never told them. I preferred to be loved for who I am, not for the 7 figures sitting in my offshore accounts. But standing at that gate, watching the woman who married my son treat my wife like a stray dog, I realized that silence was no longer an option. Before I tell you how the color drained from Victoria's face, please hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone of your worth. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. It was supposed to be the night of their lives. Victoria was launching her new fashion line at the Gilded Garden, the most exclusive private club in the city. The invitation had come via text message from my son Terrence 3 days late with a note that read, "Try to dress nice, Dad. Mom, please wear something that does not look like it came from a thrift store." I did not tell him that the suit I was wearing was bespoke Italian wool tailored to look unassuming, or that Coretta's simple blue dress was silk hand-stitched by a designer in Paris who does not put labels on her work. To them, if it did not have a giant golden logo, it was trash. We drove up to the main entrance in my Ford. It is a 2012 model, reliable, sturdy, and loud. It rumbled like a beast among the silent electric sedans and the purring Ferraris lining the driveway. I could feel the eyes of the valet parking attendants on us. They were young men in red vests trained to spot money from a mile away. When they looked at my truck, they did not see money. They saw a nuisance. I pulled up to the heavy iron gates. The security booth was manned by a guard who looked like he had been hired for his biceps rather than his customer service skills. He stepped out of the booth, his hand resting on his belt, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses even though the sun had already set. He did not wave us through. He held up a hand, palm out, stopping us cold. "State your business," he barked. He did not lean down to the window. He made me shout over the engine. I rolled down the window, keeping my hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Old habits from driving through neighborhoods where a wrong move could cost you your life. "We are here for the Freeman launch party," I said, my voice calm. "I am Augustus Freeman. This is my wife Coretta. We are the father and mother of the host." The guard lowered his sunglasses just enough to look me in the eyes. He smirked, a nasty little twist of his lips. "Freeman," he repeated, looking at a digital tablet in his hand. He scrolled slowly, deliberately, taking his time. Behind us, a black Bentley honked impatiently. The guard ignored it. He looked back at my truck, his eyes lingering on a dent in the front fender. "I do not see an Augustus on the VIP list," he said, "and the staff entrance is around the back. Deliveries are closed for the night." I felt Coretta's hand on my arm. Her grip was tight. She was not scared. Coretta does not get scared. She was angry, but she squeezed my arm to tell me to wait, to let it play out. "I am not staff," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I am Terrence Freeman's father. Call him." The guard let out a sigh that was meant to humiliate. He tapped his earpiece. "Yeah, I got an older couple here in a beat-up truck claiming to be related to the host." "Yeah. Okay. I will hold." We waited. The line of luxury cars behind us grew longer. Horns blared. Drivers in tuxedos leaned out of windows shouting at us to move our junk heap. I sat still. I watched the guard's face. I watched the way he tapped his foot, enjoying the power he held over the old man in the truck. Then the heavy oak doors of the club opened. Victoria stepped out. She looked like a diamond that had been cut too sharp. Her dress was silver and backless, shimmering under the floodlights. She walked with the confidence of a woman who believes she owns the ground she steps on. But I knew the truth. I knew that confidence was bought with credit cards maxed out in my son's name. I knew the dress was likely rented or bought with a loan I would eventually have to bail Terrence out of. She marched down the driveway, her heels clicking on the pavement like gunshots. She did not look at me. She looked at the guard. "What is the problem here?" she demanded. Her voice was high-tight with stress. "You are holding up the line. We have investors waiting to get in." The guard pointed a thumb at me. "This guy says he is your father-in-law, says he is on the list. I told him staff goes round back." Victoria finally turned her head. She looked at me through the open window. There was no warmth in her eyes, no recognition of the fact that 3 months ago I had paid her electric bill when Terrence said they were short. She looked at me, then at Coretta, and then she laughed. It was a cold socialite laugh, the kind that is meant to invite others to join in the mockery. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said loud enough for the driver of the Bentley behind us to hear. "Augustus, really? You brought the truck. I told Terrence to send you an Uber." "We prefer to drive." "Victoria," Coretta said softly. Her voice was steady, dignified. Victoria rolled her eyes. She turned back to the guard, leaning in close, creating a conspiracy of two against the world. "Look," she said, waving her hand at us as if we were a bad smell. "They are technically family, yes. But they are not on the VIP list for a reason." She paused, and then she said the words that would seal her fate. "They are not important. Do not let them in the main door. It ruins the aesthetic. Just have them park in the service lot and they can come in through the kitchen. Make sure they stay in the back. I do not want them mingling with the investors." The guard grilled. He liked this. He liked being given permission to be cruel. "You heard the lady," he said, stepping closer to my truck. "Not important. Move it. Kitchen entrance. Around the back. Now." Victoria did not wait to see us move. She turned on her heel, flipping her hair, ready to walk back into her party, ready to pretend she came from old money, ready to erase us from her perfect picture. That was when the engine of my truck turned off. I pulled the keys out of the ignition. The sudden silence was heavy. The guard blinked, confused. "Hey," I said, "move it, not park it," he shouted, reaching for his baton. I did not move. I looked at Coretta. She was already moving. She opened her door and stepped out onto the pavement. She stood up to her full height. She is a small woman, but in that moment she looked 10 feet tall. She smoothed her blue silk dress. She did not look at Victoria. She looked at the guard. Victoria stopped. She turned around, annoyed. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Get back in the truck. You are embarrassing me." Coretta ignored her. She walked around the front of the truck. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She stopped in front of the guard. He towered over her, but he took a step back, unsettled by the look in her eyes. It was the look of a queen looking at a peasant who had forgotten his place. "My husband and I do not enter through kitchens," Coretta said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried in the night air. The guard laughed, nervous now. "Lady, I do not care what you do. If you do not move this truck, I am having it towed. You are trespassing on private property. The owners of this club are very exclusive." Coretta smiled. It was a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Is that so?" she asked. She reached into her handbag. It was old leather, cracked at the handles. Victoria let out a groan of frustration. "Oh my God, are you looking for a coupon?" Victoria shouted. "Just go!" Coretta pulled out a small black card. It was not plastic. It was matte titanium. It had no numbers on the front, no bank logo, just a single small chip embedded in the center and a laser-etched signature in gold. She held it out to the guard. "Swipe it," she ordered. The guard frowned. He looked at the card, then at Coretta. "What is this, a library card? I am not swiping nothing. You need to leave." "Swipe it," Coretta repeated. The authority in her voice was absolute. It was the voice she used when she negotiated contracts with union leaders in the 80s. It was the voice that stopped arguments in boardrooms. The guard hesitated. He looked at Victoria for backup. Victoria was staring at the card, squinting. She had never seen anything like it. "Just swipe it so they leave," Victoria yelled. The guard snatched the card from Coretta's hand. He walked over to the panel on the wall of his booth. It was a high-tech scanner designed to read the credentials of the city's billionaires. He waved the card in front of the reader, rolling his eyes, expecting a red light and a rejection tone. He tapped the card against the sensor. For a second, nothing happened. The guard opened his mouth to laugh. Then the machine made a sound I had not heard in years. It was not a beep. It was a chime, a deep, resonant, harmonic chime that echoed through the entrance. The lights on the gate did not just turn green, they turned gold. A spinning golden light projected onto the pavement. The screen on the guard's booth lit up. It was bright enough that I could see the reflection in his sunglasses. It did not display a name. It did not display a membership number. It displayed 2 words in massive flashing letters. Owner access. The guard froze. His mouth hung open. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like he might faint. He looked at the screen, then at the card in his hand, then at Coretta. His hand started to shake. The electronic lock on the massive iron gates disengaged with a loud, heavy clank that sounded like a gunshot. The gates began to swing open slowly, majestically. Victoria stood frozen in the middle of the driveway. She stared at the golden light spinning on the ground. She stared at the open gate. She looked at the guard, who was now practically bowing, holding the card with 2 hands as if it were a holy relic. "What is happening?" Victoria whispered. Her voice was trembling. "Why is the gate opening?" The guard rushed out of the booth. He ran around to Coretta. He did not just hand the card back. He offered it to her head, bowed low. "I apologize, ma'am," he stammered. "I did not know. The system. I have never seen an owner key before. Please forgive me." Coretta took the card. She slipped it back into her cracked leather bag. She snapped the clasp shut. The sound was final. She looked at the guard. "You were doing your job," she said. "Badly. But you were doing it." Then she turned to Victoria. My daughter-in-law was pale. She looked like a ghost in a silver dress. Her eyes were darting from the card to the gate to us. She could not process what she was seeing. The calculation in her brain was failing. Poor people do not have titanium cards. Poor people do not make gates open with gold lights. Poor people do not make security guards tremble. "Augustus," she choked out. What was that?" I stepped out of the truck. I buttoned my jacket. I walked over to my wife and offered her my arm. We walked past the guard, who was still bowing. We walked toward the open gates. As we passed Victoria, I stopped. I looked her up and down. I looked at the dress she bought with my money. I looked at the event she funded with my loans. "You said we were not important," I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm of the eye of the storm. I leaned in close so only she could hear. "Important is a relative word, Victoria. You are about to find out exactly how relative it is." I gently guided Coretta forward. "Come, my dear," I said loud enough for the guests in the Bentley to hear. "Let us go see what our son has done with our property." We walked through the main gates, leaving Victoria standing alone on the pavement, her mouth open, her world beginning to crack under her feet. She did not know it yet, but the gate opening was the sound of her life ending. And the nightmare was just beginning. The heavy double doors of the gilded garden closed behind us, sealing out the night air and the confused whispers of the valet staff. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of white lilies and old money. The foyer was a cavern of marble and crystal designed to make anyone who entered feel small. I felt nothing. I had walked through these halls when they were nothing but blueprints on a dusty table in a warehouse down by the docks. Victoria was right on our heels. The click of her heels on the marble floor sounded like the ticking of a bomb. She breezed past us, breathless and frantic, her face flushed with a mixture of rage and panic. She was not looking at us, she was looking at her guests. A group of potential investors stood near the entrance, holding champagne flutes, their eyes wide with curiosity. They had seen the golden light at the gate. They had seen the truck. They were waiting for an explanation. Victoria did not hesitate. She put on a smile that was bright and brittle as glass. "Oh, please excuse the interruption, everyone," she announced, her voice trilling with fake laughter. "It is just a little mix-up with the service entrance." She gestured toward me and Coretta with a hand that trembled ever so slightly. "These are Terrence's old nannies," she lied. "They have been with the family since he was a baby. We treat them like charity cases, really. Sometimes they get confused about which door to use. You know how it is with the elderly when the mind starts to slip." The investors nodded slowly, their interest fading as they accepted the lie. Servants. She had called us servants. She had reduced my wife, the woman who managed the books for a multi-million-dollar logistics company, to a charity case with dementia. I looked at my son. Terrence stood next to his wife, his tuxedo impeccable, his spine non-existent. He heard her. He heard her call his mother a confused servant. He looked at me for a split second and then he looked at the floor. He took a sip of his drink and said nothing. He let the lie stand. He let his wife erase his heritage to save face in front of a few strangers with checkbooks. I felt Coretta stiffen beside me. I placed my hand over hers. "Not yet," I signaled with a squeeze. "Not yet." We allowed Victoria to herd us away from the VIP section. She snapped her fingers at a waiter and pointed to a small table near the kitchen doors, comfortably out of sight of the main party. "Sit here," she hissed under her breath once the guests were out of earshot. "Do not move. Do not speak to anyone. And for the love of God, try to look less like you just came from a garage sale." She spun around and marched back to the center of the room, linking her arm with Terrence, pulling him back into her fantasy world. I sat in the chair, which was upholstered in velvet that cost more than Victoria's first car. I looked around the room. To everyone else, this club was a symbol of status. It was where the city's power brokers came to trade secrets over scotch. But to me, it was a memory of survival. 10 years ago, I was not sitting in velvet. I was standing on a wet, concrete pier, watching the rain wash away the blood of a rival who had tried to take over my shipping routes. The logistics business in this city is not just about trucks and schedules. It is about territory. I had spent 30 years fighting for every inch of asphalt my trucks rolled on. I had fought unions, I had fought gangs, I had fought corrupt city officials. I had won, but I was tired. The violence was getting too close to home, too close to Coretta. I needed an exit. I needed a place to put my money where it would be clean, where it would grow without the stain of the streets. That was when the old owner of this club, a man named Winston, came to me. He was drowning in gambling debts. He needed cash fast, and he needed a buyer who would not ask questions. I bought the Gilded Garden on a Tuesday morning with a briefcase full of cash and a handshake. I did not buy it to join their society. I bought it to own their society. I bought it so that men who would never shake my hand in public would have to pay me membership fees to feel important. I kept my name off the door. I used a shell company. I stayed in the shadows because power is safer in the dark. I washed my hands of the port, and I became a silent landlord to the elite. And now my son was standing in the middle of my building using my money to fund a party for a wife who despised me, unaware that the very floor he stood on belonged to the father he was ashamed of. The irony was bitter, but tonight it would be sweet. A shadow fell over our table. I looked up. It was the general manager, Mr. Rossi. He was a man of impeccable discretion. He had run this club for me for a decade. He knew my face better than he knew his own wife's. He looked at the table near the kitchen. He looked at the cheap water glasses the waiter had set down. His face was a mask of professional horror. "Mr. Freeman, Mr." Rossi whispered, leaning down so only I could hear. "This is unacceptable. Shall I have the security team remove her?" He meant Victoria. He was ready to throw the host of the party out of her own launch. I shook my head slightly. "No, Mr. Rossi," I said, my voice low. "Let her have her night, but we will make some adjustments to the service." I looked at the center table where Victoria and Terrence were holding court. They were laughing loudly, trying to attract the attention of a venture capitalist named Sterling. "Bring them the house wine," I ordered. "The one we reserve for the tourists who do not know any better. The vinegar." Mr. Rossi raised an eyebrow. "And for us," I continued, "bring me the 1982 Petrus, the bottle I put in the vault the day I bought this place." Mr. Rossi smiled. It was a genuine smile. "At once, sir." 10 minutes later, the service began. I watched with the patience of a predator. A waiter approached Victoria's table carrying a bottle of red wine. It had no vintage year on the label. He poured a glass for Victoria and one for the investor Sterling. Victoria took a sip, expecting the nectar of the gods. I saw her face contort, her lips pursed. She tried to hide it, but the wine was acidic, sharp, and cheap. Sterling took a sip and set his glass down, immediately pushing it away with a grimace. At our table in the shadows, Mr. Rossi himself arrived. He carried a bottle covered in the dust of history. He presented the label to me. He uncorked it with the reverence of a priest. He poured a small amount into a crystal glass that sparkled under the lights. The aroma of the wine drifted across the room. It was rich, deep, and unmistakable to anyone who knew wealth. Victoria smelled it before she saw it. Her head snapped toward us. She saw Mr. Rossi pouring wine for the servants. She saw the dust on the bottle. She saw the dark ruby color of the liquid. She stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She marched over to us, her face a mask of indignation. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded, her voice shrill. Mr. Rossi stepped back, clutching the bottle to his chest. "I am serving the guests, madam," he replied coolly. "That wine," Victoria pointed a shaking finger at the bottle, "that is a vintage Petrus. Do you have any idea how much that costs? You are wasting it on them. They cannot even appreciate it. They probably think it is grape juice." She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "Give that back, Augustus. You are embarrassing me again, drinking the most expensive wine in the cellar while my investors drink table wine." I took a slow sip. The wine was perfect. It tasted of victory. "It was a gift from the management, Victoria," I said calmly. "Perhaps they like us better than they like you." Victoria let out a noise of pure frustration. She turned to Mr. Rossi. "I want that bottle at my table, now, and bring 2 more. I am paying for this event, so I decide who drinks what. Put it on my tab." Mr. Rossi looked at me. I gave a barely perceptible nod. "Very well, madam," Mr. Rossi said. "But for a vintage of this caliber, we require immediate payment. We cannot put it on a tab." Victoria scoffed. She grabbed her purse from a nearby chair. She pulled out a platinum credit card. It was the card Terrence had opened in his name, the one backed by the funds I had secretly transferred to his account to cover his debts last month. "Fine," she snapped. "Swipe it. Bring 3 bottles." She thrust the card at Mr. Rossi. He took a handheld card reader from his pocket. He inserted the card. The room went quiet. The investors were watching. Terrence was watching. I watched the little machine. I knew exactly what it would say. 5 minutes ago, while I sat in the car, I had sent a text message to my banker. I had instructed him to freeze the auxiliary account I had set up for Terrence. The well was dry. The machine beeped. A harsh, dissonant sound. "Declined, Mr. Rossi said loudly. Victoria froze. "Try it again," she hissed. "It is a platinum card. It has a $50,000 limit." Mr. Rossi tried it again. "Beep," declined. Victoria's face turned the color of the cheap wine she had just drank. She looked at the investor Sterling, who was checking his watch. She looked at Terrence, who was patting his pockets, searching for a wallet that contained nothing but empty promises. "There must be a mistake," Victoria stammered. "The chip is faulty. It says insufficient funds." "Madam," Mr. Rossi said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "Perhaps you would prefer the house wine. It is on the house for charity cases." He used her own words against her. The insult landed like a physical blow. Victoria stood there holding her useless piece of plastic while I sat in my corner swirling a $5,000 glass of wine. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. She did not understand how the universe was aligning against her. She did not know that the universe was sitting 5 feet away wearing a suit she thought was cheap. She retreated to her table, humiliated, her head low. The party continued, but the air had changed. The smell of desperation was starting to overpower the lilies. And I was just getting started. The night was young, and I had many more lessons to teach. The morning after the party at the Gilded Garden, I woke up with a bitter taste in my mouth. It was not from the wine. It was from the realization that my victory over Victoria was only the beginning of a war I never wanted to fight. I sat at my kitchen table drinking black coffee and looking at the business card my son Terrence had given me 3 years ago. It said Vice President of Regional Sales at Apex Tech. It was printed on thick cardstock with raised lettering. It looked impressive. It looked like success. But after last night, after seeing my son stand by while his wife humiliated his mother, I began to wonder how much of his life was real and how much was just another layer of paint on a rotting fence. I decided to pay him a visit. I did not call ahead. I wanted to see the man he was when he thought no one was watching. I drove my truck to the downtown district where the glass skyscrapers touched the clouds. I walked into the lobby of the Apex Tech building. It was a cathedral of commerce filled with people rushing toward elevators holding cups of expensive coffee. I approached the security desk. I told the guard I was there to see Terrence Freeman. I expected him to call up to the 30th floor. I expected him to hand me a visitor badge. Instead, the guard frowned at his monitor. He typed the name again. He shook his head. "Sir, we do not have a Terrence Freeman in our directory. Apex Tech occupies floors 20 through 40, but their personnel list does not show that name." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I insisted. I showed him the card. The guard looked at it, and then he pointed to a small sign near the elevators. "That address is for the CO working space on the 5th floor. It is a virtual office service. They rent mailboxes and desks by the hour. You might want to try there." I took the elevator to the 5th floor. The doors opened into a room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. It was not a corporate headquarters. It was a holding pen for dreamers and liars. There were rows of empty desks and a few people typing furiously on laptops trying to look busy. I walked down the rows. And then I saw him. Terrence was sitting in a corner cubicle. He was not on a conference call. He was not reviewing spreadsheets. He was playing a video game on his phone. His suit jacket was draped over the chair. It looked tired. He looked tired. The vice president of nothing. I stood behind him for a full minute before he noticed my reflection in his dark computer screen. He jumped. He spun around and the phone fell from his hand, clattering onto the cheap carpet. "Dad." The word came out as a gasp. He scrambled to stand up, trying to block my view of the empty desk, trying to assemble the fragments of his lie before I could see them. But it was too late. I looked around the room. I looked at the rental agreement taped to the wall. "Pack your things, Terrence," I said. "We are going for a walk." He did not argue. He grabbed his jacket and followed me out like a child called to the principal's office. We went to a park bench across the street. The city noise was loud, but the silence between us was louder. "How long?" I asked. He looked at his hands. He could not look me in the eye. 6 months, he whispered. "They let me go 6 months ago. Restructuring. 6 months." For half a year, he had been waking up, putting on a suit, kissing his wife goodbye, and coming to sit in a rented chair to play games on his phone. "And Victoria?" I asked. "Does she know?" He flinched. "No. God, no. Dad, she cannot know. If she knew I was unemployed, she would leave me. You know how she is. She needs security. She needs the lifestyle." I looked at my son and I felt a wave of nausea. He was not a partner in a marriage. He was a hostage. "So how are you paying for it?" I asked. "The launch party, the dresses, the car. If you have no salary, where is the money coming from?" Terrence began to shake. He was a grown man of 38 years, but in that moment he looked like a terrified boy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of papers. They were crumpled and stained with sweat. He handed them to me. I unfolded them. They were not bank statements. They were loan agreements. But not from a bank. These were street loans, high interest, short term. The kind of loans that come with a threat of violence if you miss a payment. I saw the names on the paper. I knew these people. I had spent 40 years keeping my business away from people like this. "You borrowed $50,000 from Rocco Scarpetta," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Terrence, do you have any idea who that man is? He does not send debt collectors. He sends men with baseball bats." I had to. Dad, Terrence sobbed. He covered his face with his hands. "Victoria wanted the party. She said it was her big break. She said if I did not support her dreams, I was holding her back. She threatened to take the baby if we ever have one. She said she would leave and take everything. I was desperate. I thought I could pay it back once her fashion line took off." I looked at the numbers. $50,000, plus interest. It was enough to break him. It was enough to get him killed. He grabbed my arm. His grip was weak and clammy. "Dad, please. You have money. I saw the card last night. I saw the gate open. You have millions. You have to help me. If I do not pay Rocco by Friday," he said he would come to the house. He said he would hurt Victoria. I looked at the city skyline. I had built an empire to protect my family, and now my family was using that protection to destroy themselves. I could pay the debt. It was a drop in the ocean for me. But if I paid it without teaching him a lesson, I would just be financing his next mistake. "I will pay it," I said. Terrence let out a breath that sounded like a scream. He tried to hug me, but I held up a hand. "I will pay it on one condition. Anything, Dad, anything. You are going to cut her off. No more credit cards for Victoria. No more parties. No more lies. You are going to go home and tell her you lost your job. You are going to tell her that the lifestyle is over. You are going to live within your means. If she loves you, she will stay. If she leaves, then she never loved you and you are better off." Terrence nodded frantically. His eyes were wide with relief. "I will, Dad. I promise. I will tell her tonight. Just please pay the debt. I cannot let them hurt her." I took out my phone. I called my banker. I authorized a wire transfer of $55,000 to Terrence's account. It was enough to clear the debt and give him a month of breathing room to find a real job. "It is done," I said. "The money is in your account. Go pay Rocco. Today. And then go home and be a man, Terrence. Be the man I raised you to be." He hugged me then. He cried on my shoulder. He thanked me a dozen times. He told me I had saved his life. He told me he would never lie again. I watched him run toward the subway station. He looked lighter. He looked like a man who had been given a second chance. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my son was just lost and that I had guided him back to the path. I went home to Coretta. I told her everything. She listened, her face impassive. She did not trust Victoria, but she wanted to trust her son. We ate dinner in silence, hoping that across town Terrence was having the hard conversation that would save his marriage. That night I sat in my armchair reading a book. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was a notification from social media. I rarely checked it, but I followed my son and his wife to keep an eye on them. I picked up the phone. It was a new post from Victoria. I opened the image. My heart stopped. It was not a picture of a humble dinner. It was not a picture of a couple having a serious talk. It was a picture of Victoria. She was standing in the driveway of their rented house. She was wearing a new dress. And behind her, wrapped in a giant red bow, was a brand new Porsche Cayenne. The caption read, "Hubby spoils me best surprise ever, new car day, love my life." I stared at the screen. The timestamp was 10 minutes ago. Terrence had not gone to Rocco. He had not paid the debt. He had taken the money I gave him to save his life, and he had gone to a dealership. He had used it as a down payment on a luxury car to buy another week of fake smiles from a woman who hated him. He had looked me in the eye. He had cried. He had sworn on his life. And then he had walked away and spat on my sacrifice. He was more afraid of Victoria's disappointment than he was of the mob. He was more afraid of losing his trophy wife than he was of losing his father's respect. I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It was a coldness I had not felt since the days on the docks when I had to cut ties with partners who stole from the shipments. It was the coldness of a final decision. I showed the phone to Coretta. She looked at the picture. She looked at the smile on Victoria's face. She looked at the shiny car. She handed the phone back to me. She did not cry. She took off her reading glasses and folded them on the table. "He is gone, Augustus," she said softly. "The boy we raised is gone. That man out there is a stranger." I nodded. I stood up. I walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. I logged into the family trust I had set up years ago. The trust that held the deed to the house Terrence and Victoria lived in. The trust that paid their insurance. The trust that was supposed to be their safety net. I did not feel anger anymore. Anger is hot. This was ice. I began to type. I began to cancel. I began to close accounts. He made his choice, I said to the empty room. Now he has to live with it. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. It was not Terrence. I had nothing left to say to him. I dialed Jada King, my lawyer. It was late, but she answered on the first ring. "Mr. Freeman," she said, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Jada," I said, my voice steady. "Initiate protocol Ashes." There was a pause on the line. Jada knew what that meant. We had drafted it 5 years ago as a worst-case scenario. It was the nuclear option. It meant total severance. It meant the complete withdrawal of all assets and support. "Are you sure, Augustus?" she asked. "Once we start this, there is no going back. He will lose everything. The house, the car, the credit. He will be on the street." I looked at the picture of the Porsche one last time. I looked at the son who chose a car over his own father's trust. "I am sure," I said. "Burn it down, Jada. Burn it all down." I hung up. The war had started with a swipe of a card at a gate, but now it was going to end with a signature on an eviction notice. My son wanted to play the big shot. He wanted to live a lie. Well, I was about to introduce him to the most brutal truth of all. The bank of Dad was closed, permanently, and the rent was due. The silence in our house that Sunday morning was not peaceful. It was the heavy, expectant silence before a storm breaks. Coretta sat by the window knitting a scarf for Maya. I sat at my desk watching the notifications roll in on my secure banking app. Protocol Ashes was live. It was not a sudden explosion. It was a systematic suffocation. First, the joint credit card Terrence used for groceries and gas went dark. Then, the secret slush fund I had topped up monthly for emergencies vanished. Finally, the auto-pay on their utility bills, which had been linked to my account for 5 years, was canceled. Across town, I knew exactly what was happening. It started with a declined transaction at a coffee shop, then a rejected payment for the cable bill, and then the realization would hit them like a freight train. My phone rang at noon. It was not Terrence, it was Victoria. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again, 7 times in 10 minutes. Then came the text message. It was a picture. It was a photo of their living room, or what was left of it. The flat-screen TV was shattered on the floor. A vase was smashed against the wall. The caption read, "Look what you made me do. You think you can control us. You think you can starve us out. You will pay for this, Augustus." I showed the message to Coretta. She stared at the broken glass in the photo. "She is dangerous, Augustus," she said quietly. "She is losing control." I nodded. "A cornered animal bites," I said. "But we are not backing down. Not after the Porsche. Not after the lies." An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was a video call. The caller ID said Maya's iPad. My heart leaped. Maya, my 8-year-old granddaughter, the only innocent soul in this entire mess. I had not seen her since the party. I missed her laugh. I missed the way she would run to me when I picked her up from school. I answered the call immediately. "Maya, sweetie," I said, my voice softening. "How are you?" The screen lit up. But it was not Maya's smiling face I saw. It was Maya sitting on a chair looking scared. And standing behind her, looming like a shadow, was Victoria. Victoria was not screaming. She was smiling. It was a tight, terrifying smile. "Say hello to Grandpa, Maya," Victoria said. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her hand was gripping Maya's shoulder hard enough to turn her knuckles white. "Hi, Grandpa," Maya whispered. She looked at her mother, then back at the screen. I leaned closer to the phone. "Maya, are you okay, honey? Where is your daddy?" Victoria squeezed Maya's shoulder. "Tell him what we talked about," sweetie Victoria prompted. "Tell Grandpa what he is." Maya's lip trembled. Tears welled up in her big brown eyes. She shook her head. "I do not want to say it, Mommy," she whimpered. "Say it," Victoria hissed. "Or no tablet for a month, and no seeing Daddy until he fixes this." Maya looked at me. A single tear rolled down her cheek. You are a dirty poor man," she recited, her voice barely audible. "You are not important, and we do not want to see you anymore." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. My granddaughter. My Maya. The girl I taught to ride a bike. The girl I read stories to every night when Terrence was working late. She was being used as a weapon. She was being taught to hate me, to despise me based on a lie. I felt a pain in my chest so sharp I thought I was having a heart attack. Coretta gasped beside me, covering her mouth with her hand. "Maya, listen to me," I said, my voice shaking. "That is not true. Grandpa loves you. Grandma loves you. We are not—" Victoria snatched the iPad away. Her face filled the screen, distorted and ugly with rage. "Did you hear that, Augustus?" she spat. "She hates you. She knows what you are. A stingy old man who wants to ruin her future. You want to cut us off, fine. Then you are cut off too. You will never see her again. You will never speak to her again. Unless—" She paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "Unless what, Victoria?" I asked, my voice cold as ice. "Unless you sign over the house," she said. "The deed to your little shack. I know it is worth more than it looks. The land value in that neighborhood has skyrocketed. Transfer the title to me, and maybe, just maybe, I will let Maya come visit. Otherwise, she grows up thinking her grandfather is a monster who abandoned her." She did not wait for an answer. She ended the call. The screen went black. I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark glass. I felt sick. I felt a rage so pure, so hot, it burned away the sadness. She had crossed the final line. Money was one thing, disrespect was another. But weaponizing a child using my granddaughter's innocence to extort me, that was an act of war. Coretta stood up. She walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were dry. "She wants the house," she said. "She thinks it is just an old house on a big lot. She has no idea." I looked at Coretta. She was right. Victoria had done her homework, but she had used the wrong cheat sheet. She knew the neighborhood was gentrifying. She knew developers were buying up properties. She estimated our 5 acres were worth maybe $1 million. What she did not know, what even Terrence did not know, was that the land our house sat on was zoned for high-density commercial use. I had fought the city council for 10 years to get that zoning change. And last week I had received an appraisal from a developer who wanted to build a luxury hotel complex. The offer was $15 million. Victoria was trying to blackmail me for $1 million, unaware she was sitting on a $15 million gold mine. And she was willing to destroy her own daughter's heart to get it. She will never get it, I vowed. Not 1 square inch. Not 1 blade of grass. The next morning, a courier arrived at our door. He handed me a thick envelope. It was not a letter of apology. It was not a picture drawn by Maya. It was a legal summons. I opened it on the porch. Coretta watched me over her knitting. Emergency petition for guardianship, the document read. Petitioner Victoria Freeman. Reason for petition: severe cognitive decline and inability to manage financial affairs. I read the attached affidavit. It was a work of fiction so elaborate it was almost impressive. It claimed I had been found wandering the streets confused. It claimed I was spending money irrationally, giving it away to strangers. It claimed Coretta was suffering from advanced dementia and was unable to care for herself or me. It stated that for our own safety, we needed to be placed in a secure facility immediately, a state-run facility, the kind of place where people go to be forgotten. And who was proposed as the legal guardian with full control over our assets and our persons? Victoria Freeman. She was going for the kill. She did not just want the money. She wanted to lock us away. She wanted to strip us of our freedom, our dignity, and our voices. She wanted to bury us alive so she could dance on our graves. I looked up from the paper. The sun was shining on my lawn. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day for a fight. I walked back inside. I picked up the phone. I dialed Jada King. Jada, I said. They served the papers. I know, Jada replied. Her voice was sharp, ready for battle. I saw the filing this morning. They are moving fast, Augustus. They have a hearing scheduled for Thursday. They are going to try to ambush you. Let them try, I said. Jada, they want a war. They want to prove I am incompetent. They want to prove I am a confused old man who needs a keeper. So what is the plan, Augustus? Jada asked. Do we file a counter motion? Do we get independent evaluations? No, I said. A counter motion is defensive. I am done playing defense. I looked at the picture of Maya on the mantelpiece, the picture Victoria had tried to taint. We are going to give them exactly what they want, Jada. There was a silence on the line. Excuse me, Augustus. They say I am a confused old man, I said. They say I am losing my mind. Well then, let us show them a confused old man. Let us give them a performance they will never forget. I explained my plan. It was risky. It was dangerous. It required me to put my trust in the one thing Victoria underestimated the most, my intelligence. When I hung up, I turned to Coretta. Get the soup ready, my dear, I said, and make sure you leave the stove on just a little too long. We have guests coming for dinner tonight, and we need to set the stage. Coretta smiled. It was a small, sad smile. You are going to play the fool, she said. I am going to play the fool, I agreed. Because a fool is the only thing a king never fears, and Victoria thinks she is a queen. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was wait for the rats to come for the cheese. The sun had barely begun to set when the headlights of a familiar car swept across our living room window. It was Terrence's car. But this time they did not park on the street like strangers. They pulled right into the driveway. I watched from behind the curtain. Victoria stepped out first. She was not wearing her usual designer armor. She was wearing a simple floral dress and flats. Her hair was loose. She held a large ceramic casserole dish covered in foil. Terrence followed her carrying a basket of bread and a bottle of sparkling juice. They looked like a picture from a magazine advertising the perfect American family. It was a transformation so sudden and so complete that it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Just yesterday they were screaming threats and filing legal petitions to have me locked away. Today they were standing on my porch looking like they had come to bake cookies. Coretta looked at me. Her eyes were hard. She did not trust this any more than I did. Let them in, I said. Let us see what act of the play we are in now. I opened the door. Victoria beamed. It was a smile that showed too many teeth. Hi, Dad, she said. Her voice was soft, trembling slightly as if she were holding back tears of remorse. Hi, Mom. We come in peace. She lifted the casserole dish slightly. I made your favorite, she said, looking at Coretta. Chicken pot pie, from scratch. We just wanted to come over and apologize. We have been under so much stress lately and we said things we did not mean. We want to start over. Terrence stood behind her, staring at his shoes. He looked pale. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. We let them in. The house smelled of lavender and old wood. Victoria walked into the kitchen and set the dish down on the table. She bustled around getting plates and silverware, acting as if she had not called this house a shack just 48 hours ago. "Please sit," she urged us, pulling out chairs. "Let us just have a nice family dinner. No talk about lawyers, no talk about money, just us." I sat down. Coretta sat next to me. We watched them. Victoria served the pie. It steamed and smelled rich and creamy. She placed a large portion in front of me and another in front of Coretta. She gave Terrence a smaller piece and took a tiny sliver for herself. "Eat up," she said, her eyes shining with anticipation. "It is best when it is hot." She watched me. She was not eating. Her fork hovered over her plate, but her eyes were fixed on my face. Terrence was pushing his food around his plate, his hand shaking so badly the fork clicked against the china. I picked up my spoon. I looked at the pie. It looked normal. It smelled like chicken and thyme. I glanced at Victoria. She offered an encouraging nod. "Go on, Dad," she said. "Tell me if it is too salty." I tried a new recipe. I lifted the spoon to my lips. I took a small sip of the sauce. The flavor hit my tongue instantly. It was creamy. It was savory. But underneath the heavy layer of salt and herbs, there was something else. It was faint. Most people would never have noticed it, but I was not most people. 40 years ago, I drove routes through parts of the country where the water ran brown and the food could kill you if you were not careful. I had learned to taste the metal in the water. I had learned to taste the chemical tang of spoilage before it hit my stomach. I knew the taste of danger. And this soup tasted like copper. It tasted like a battery touched to the tip of a wet tongue. It was a sharp metallic bitterness that coated the roof of my mouth and refused to be washed away by the cream. I did not swallow. I held the liquid in my mouth, letting it sit there, analyzing it. It was not a spice. It was not a cooking error. It was chemical. I looked at Terrence. He had stopped pretending to eat. He was staring at me, his face slick with sweat. He knew. My son knew exactly what was in this food, and he was watching his father eat it. I swallowed. It went down hard. "Is it good?" Victoria asked. She leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the table edge. "It is delicious, Victoria," I lied. My voice was steady, very unique. "What spices did you use?" "Oh, just the usual," she said, relaxing slightly. "Sage, rosemary, a little love." I looked at Coretta. She was about to take a bite. Her spoon was halfway to her mouth. I moved fast. I knocked my water glass over. It was a clumsy move, the kind of move a clumsy old man might make. The water splashed across the table, soaking the tablecloth and hitting Coretta's arm. "Oh no," I exclaimed, standing up. "I am so clumsy. Coretta, I am so sorry." Coretta dropped her spoon. She looked at me. She saw the look in my eyes. It was a warning. She understood instantly. "It is okay, Augustus," she said, standing up and brushing the water off her dress. "It is just water. Let me go get a towel." "Do not eat that," I whispered as I helped her up, leaning in close so only she could hear. "Do not touch it." She stiffened, but she nodded. She went to the kitchen sink. I grabbed a handful of napkins and started mopping up the spill. In the confusion, I grabbed Coretta's plate. "I will just clear this," I said. It got soggy from the water. "No," Victoria said sharply. She stood up halfway. "It is fine, Dad. Just eat yours. We can get Mom more." I ignored her. I took both plates. "Mine and Coretta's. I will just scrape these and we can start fresh," I said, walking toward the back door. I hate eating at a messy table. "Where are you going?" Victoria asked, her voice rising in panic. "The trash is under the sink. I always give the scraps to the stray cat," I said. "He waits on the porch. Shame to waste good chicken." I did not wait for her permission. I opened the back door and stepped out into the cool evening air. I closed the door behind me, but I did not latch it. I could hear Victoria hissing at Terrence inside. "He is ruining it," she whispered furiously. "He is throwing it away." "Shut up," Terrence whispered back. "He will hear you." I walked to the edge of the porch. There was a stray cat that lived under my shed. A scruffy orange tabby I called Buster. He was always hungry. He came running when he heard the door open, meowing for food. I looked at the plate in my hand. The creamy sauce glistened in the porch light. It looked so innocent. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the food. I did not want to do this. I did not want to know the truth. Because if I was right, if my instincts were correct, then the people sitting in my dining room were not just greedy, they were monsters. I scraped a small amount of the filling onto the wooden floorboards. Just a spoonful. "Here, boy," I whispered. "I am sorry." Buster pounced on the food. He ate it greedily, licking the wood clean. I waited. Inside the house, I could hear the murmur of voices. They were waiting for me to come back. They were waiting for the drugs to kick in. They were waiting for the show to start. I watched the cat. For a minute, nothing happened. He sat back and licked his paws, cleaning his face. Then he stopped. His ears twitched. He shook his head violently as if he had water in his ears. He let out a low growl. Then his legs gave out. He collapsed onto his side. His body went rigid. His legs began to paddle the air in a rhythmic, jerky motion. His eyes were wide open, pupils dilated until they were black holes. He was having a seizure. He foamed at the mouth, a white froth bubbling on his lips. I watched in horror. This was not a sleeping pill. This was not a mild sedative to make me drowsy. This was a powerful neurotoxin or a heavy dose of antipsychotics meant to scramble the brain signals. If Coretta and I had eaten those full plates, we would not just be sleepy. We would be hallucinating. We would be losing motor control. We would be drooling and twitching exactly like the animals they claimed we were. And then they would have called the ambulance. They would have called the doctors. "Look," they would have said. "Look at them. They are having an episode. They are losing their minds. They cannot take care of themselves." It was the perfect trap. The medical evidence they needed to win the guardianship case. They were not waiting for us to get sick naturally. They were making us sick. I knelt down beside the cat. The seizure was stopping. Buster lay panting on the wood, his sides heaving. He was alive, but he was terrified. He tried to stand and fell over again, his balance gone. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It was heavier than the rage I felt at the gate. This was not about disrespect. This was about survival. I took a small plastic bag from my pocket, the one I used to carry dog treats when I walked the neighbor's dog. I scraped the rest of the pie from the plate into the bag. I sealed it tight. This was my evidence. This was the weapon that would send them to prison. I stood up. I wiped my face. I had to go back in there. I had to face them. And I had to give the performance of a lifetime. They wanted a confused old man. They wanted a victim. I opened the door and stepped back into the kitchen. I let my hands shake as I put the empty plates in the sink. I let my eyes lose focus. I let my mouth hang open just a little. I walked back to the dining room. Victoria was watching me like a hawk. Terrence was staring at his water glass. "Did the cat like it?" Victoria asked. I blinked slowly. I looked at her as if I did not recognize her for a second. "Cat," I mumbled. "What cat?" I thought I was feeding the chickens." Victoria's eyes lit up. She looked at Terrence. She smiled. A cruel, victorious smile. "It is starting," she mouthed to him. I sat down heavily in my chair. I rubbed my temples. "I feel funny," I said. "Dizzy. Everything is spinning." I reached out and grabbed Coretta's hand. I squeezed it 3 times. The signal. Play along. Coretta looked at me. She saw the fire deep in my eyes behind the act. She slumped in her chair. "Me too, Augustus," she whispered. "I feel so tired." Victoria stood up. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. She started recording. "Oh no," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern for the camera. "Terrence, look at them. They are having another episode. Dad, are you okay? Do you know where you are?" I looked at the camera lens. I let my head roll back. "Who are you?" I slurred. Where is my truck?" "I have to make a delivery." "Perfect," Victoria whispered. She had her evidence, or so she thought. She did not know that in my pocket I had the real evidence, and she did not know that the man she was filming was not losing his mind. He was sharpening his blade. The doctor's trap had snapped shut, but they had caught a tiger, not a mouse, and now the tiger was in the room with them, waiting, just waiting for the right moment to bite. The performance began not with a shout, but with a stumble. I let my legs go heavy. I allowed my shoulders to slump forward as if the weight of gravity had suddenly doubled. I looked across the dining room table at my son. Terrence was wiping sweat from his forehead, his eyes darting between me and the empty plate where the poisoned pie had been. He looked terrified. He looked guilty, but I needed him to look convinced. I stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. I let my jaw go slack. I unfocused my eyes, staring past Terrence at the wall behind him. "Marcus," I whispered. My voice was raspy. "Marcus, is that you?" Terrence froze. Marcus was his uncle, my younger brother, who had died in a warehouse accident 30 years ago. It was a name we rarely spoke. A ghost from a time of poverty and struggle. "Dad," Terrence said, his voice trembling. "It is me. Terrence, your son." I shook my head violently. I slammed my hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Do not lie to me, Marcus," I shouted, letting a line of saliva drool from the corner of my lip. "You promised to help me load the truck. The shipment is late. The union boss is going to kill us. Where have you been?" I took a step toward him, dragging my left leg as if I had lost control of my motor functions. It was a detail I remembered from a stroke victim I had visited in the hospital years ago. The horror on Terrence's face was genuine. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "Victoria, look at him," Terrence stammered. "He thinks I am Uncle Marcus. He is hallucinating." Victoria did not look horrified. She looked delighted. She sat back in her chair, watching me with the cold, clinical interest of a scientist observing a lab rat. "It is happening," she said softly. "The toxins are hitting the frontal lobe. Confusion, memory regression. It is perfect. Keep him talking, Terrence. We need more." I decided to give her more. I spun around, appearing lost in my own dining room. I looked at the potted plant in the corner near the hallway. I began to unbuckle my belt. My hands fumbled with the clasp, shaking intentionally. "I have to go," I muttered loud enough for them to hear. "The bathroom. Who moved the bathroom?" "Dad, no," Terrence yelled, rushing toward me. "That is a plant. The bathroom is down the hall." I ignored him. I let my pants drop slightly. I was not actually going to relieve myself in front of my wife, but I needed to sell the indignity of the moment. I needed them to believe that Augustus Freeman, the man who prided himself on his impeccable appearance, had lost all sense of shame. Terrence grabbed my arms, trying to pull me away. I fought him. I swung my arms wildly, hitting him in the chest. "Get off me," I roared. "You are trying to steal my cargo. I know you are." I pushed him away and collapsed onto the floor, curling into a fetal position. I began to weep. Not soft crying, but loud, confused sobbing. "I want to go home," I wailed. "Please, I just want to go home." Terrence stood over me, breathing hard. He looked at Victoria. "He has lost it completely," Terrence said. "We have to call an ambulance." "No," Victoria said sharply. She stood up and walked over to where I lay. She looked down at me with a sneer. "Not yet." She reached into her purse. She did not pull out a phone to call 911. She pulled out her smartphone and opened an app. I saw the screen reflection in the hallway mirror. It was a live streaming app, but it was set to a private group. Group name, The Inner Circle. She hit the record button. "Hey guys," she said to the screen, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "You will not believe this. Remember I told you my father-in-law was losing his marbles? Well, look at this show." She pointed the camera at me. I lay on the floor pretending to pick at the threads of the rug, muttering nonsense about shipping manifests and lost keys. "He just tried to pee on a plant," she narrated, laughing softly. "He thinks my husband is his dead brother. It is actually kind of sad, but also hilarious. This is what I have to deal with every day. This is why we need that guardianship. He is a danger to himself." She walked around me, getting different angles. She zoomed in on my face, on the tears streaming down my cheeks. She was not documenting a tragedy. She was creating content. She was building her case for the court of public opinion and for the judge. "Look at him," she continued. "He is totally gone. The lights are on, but nobody is home. We are going to have to put him in a home soon. It is the only humane thing to do. Plus, once he is declared incompetent, we can finally sell that eyesore of a house and get the care he really needs." She winked at the camera. "And by care, I mean a nice vacation for us, right?" I heard a ping from her phone. Someone had commented. She laughed. "I know, right, Stacy? It is like living in a nursing home already. Ugh, the smell of old people is the worst." I lay there listening to her mock the man who had paid her debts, the man who had welcomed her into his family. Every word was a log on the fire of my resolve. She thought she was filming my downfall. She did not know she was filming her own confession. I memorized every word she said. I memorized the glee in her voice. But the most important part of the plan was not my performance. It was what was happening behind her back. Coretta was sitting at the table. She had her head in her hands, pretending to be overwhelmed with grief and confusion. She was rocking back and forth, moaning softly. "Oh, Augustus," she wailed. "What is happening?" Victoria ignored her. She was too focused on her star subject on the floor. Victoria walked over to the kitchen island. She set her phone down on the wireless charging pad, propping it up against a fruit bowl so it could continue to film the room while she grabbed a glass of water. "I am parched," she said to the camera. Being a caregiver is such hard work. She turned her back to the phone to fill a glass from the tap. That was the moment. Coretta stopped rocking. Her head snapped up. The grief vanished from her face, replaced by the sharp, calculating look of the woman who had audited books for Fortune 500 companies. She reached into her sleeve. She pulled out a small black device. It was not a bug from a spy movie. It was a high-tech data extractor tool used by forensic accountants. We had bought it online 3 days ago when we realized how deep the rot went. Coretta moved with the speed of a striking cobra. She leaned across the table. She did not touch the phone. She did not need to. She slid the small device under the charging pad. It was a wireless interceptor. It was designed to clone the signal of any device charging on the pad and mirror its data stream to a secure server. It needed 10 seconds to establish the handshake. I saw Coretta's eyes lock onto mine. She gave a microscopic nod. I needed to buy her 10 seconds. I let out a scream, a blood-curdling shriek of terror. "The rats!" I yelled, pointing at the ceiling. "The rats are eating the money! Stop them!" Victoria spun around, water sloshing from her glass. "What the hell?" she snapped. She looked at me. She did not look at the phone. 1 second, 2 seconds. I thrashed on the floor, kicking the leg of the table. "Get them off me!" I screamed. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. Terrence tried to hold me down. "Dad, stop it!" "There are no rats," he yelled. 5 seconds. 6 seconds. I grabbed Terrence's lapels and pulled him down. "They are in the walls, Terrence," I whispered frantically. "They are eating the inheritance." 7 seconds. 8 seconds. Victoria rolled her eyes. "He is totally insane," she said, turning back to the sink to dump her water. 9 seconds. 10 seconds. The small light on the device under the charger turned from red to green. It was done. Every text message, every call log, every GPS location, and every deleted email on Victoria's phone was now being copied to a cloud server that Jada King could access. Coretta sat back. She put her head in her hands again and resumed her wailing. "Augustus, please stop," she cried. Victoria picked up her phone. She checked the screen. She did not notice the slight lag as the background transfer began. She smiled at the camera one last time. "All right, guys, I have to go deal with this mess," she said. "Wish me luck. We are calling the doctor in the morning. This nightmare is almost over." She ended the stream. She did not know how right she was. The nightmare was almost over. But she was the one who was going to wake up screaming. I lay back on the rug, panting, letting my eyes close. I felt the hard floor against my back. I felt the shame of the act I had just performed. But beneath the shame, I felt a cold, hard triumph. We were inside. We had eyes on her secrets. And tomorrow we would listen to everything she thought she had buried. The play was over. The trap was sprung. And now the hunter became the hunted. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness of our kitchen, the only light in a house that felt like it was holding its breath. Coretta sat beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the digital waveform moving across the monitor. The audio feed from Victoria's phone was crystal clear, transmitted by the device Coretta had planted under the charger. It was 11 at night. Terrence was asleep in the guest room, exhausted from the stress of his own lies. But Victoria was awake. She was in the master bedroom, pacing back and forth. The sound of her footsteps was audible through the microphone. Thump, 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 like a heartbeat speeding up. She dialed a number. It was not a local number. It was a private line, encrypted, meant to be untraceable. But she was making the call from a compromised device. The phone rang once, twice. Then a man answered. It was not Terrence. It was a voice I had not heard in 30 years, but I would recognize it in the depths of hell. "Hello, beautiful," the man said. "Is it done?" Did the old man crack? Victoria let out a breath that sounded like a shudder. "It is done, Sterling," she whispered. "The show was perfect. He is completely gone. He was pissing on the floor, screaming about rats. It was pathetic. We have it all on video. The doctor will sign the papers tomorrow morning. We will have power of attorney by Friday. Sterling laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound like sandpaper on bone. Good girl, he said. You did well. I told you they were weak. I told you they would break. I froze. My hand hovered over the pause button. The name echoed in my ears. Sterling. It was not just a random investor from the party. It was not just a rich man looking for a deal. It was Arthur Sterling. The man I destroyed 3 decades ago. The man who swore he would burn my world to ash. The realization hit me harder than the fall from any cliff. This was not just about a greedy daughter-in-law wanting a house. This was a long game, a revenge plot, 30 years in the making, executed with the patience of a spider spinning a web. To understand why the name Sterling made my blood turn to ice, you have to understand the port of Newark. In the 90s, it was a war zone, not with guns, but with contracts, unions, and territory. I was a young man then, hungry and ambitious, trying to break into a logistics industry that was dominated by old white money. They did not want a black man running routes. They did not want me bidding on city contracts. But I did not care. I worked harder. I drove longer, and I was smarter. Arthur Sterling was the king of the port back then. He owned the warehouses, the cranes, and half the city council. He came from money that dated back to the cotton fields, and he looked at me like I was something he should scrape off his shoe. The conflict started over the West Side Terminal. It was a derelict piece of land, a strategic choke point for all cargo coming from the southern docks. Sterling wanted it to build a luxury marina, a playground for his rich friends. I wanted it to build a distribution center that would employ 500 men from my neighborhood. The city put it up for auction. Sterling thought he had it in the bag. He bribed the officials. He intimidated the other bidders. He laughed when I walked into the auction room wearing my work boots. But he did not know I had spent 3 years gathering evidence of his bribes. He did not know I had the FBI sitting in the back row. When the bidding started, Sterling bid low, thinking he was the only player. I bid high. He bid higher. I matched him. Then I signaled the agents. They arrested him right there on the floor for racketeering and fraud. The city canceled his bids. I won the terminal legally, fair and square. Sterling lost everything. His company was liquidated to pay fines. He spent 5 years in federal prison. The day he was sentenced, he looked at me across the courtroom. He did not scream. He did not shout. He just mouthed 3 words. I will return. And now, 30 years later, he was back. He had rebuilt his fortune in the shadows, investing in predatory real estate and shell companies. And he had found the perfect weapon to destroy me. Not a lawsuit, not a bomb, my own son. He had found Terrence weak, insecure. Terrence, and he had planted Victoria like a virus in his life. The land my house sits on is not just a home. It is the last piece of the puzzle Sterling needs, the West Side Terminal. My terminal is directly adjacent to my 5 acres. If he gets my land, he can connect the terminal to the main highway, bypassing the city toll roads. It would triple the value of his logistics empire. It is a $15 million piece of land that controls a $1 billion flow of goods, and he was using my son's wife to steal it for pennies. The recording continued, pulling me back from the past into the ugly present. Victoria was talking again, her voice dripping with a mix of fear and excitement. So when do I get the rest of the money? She asked. I did my part. Sterling, I humiliated them. I got the evidence. I made Terrence think it was his idea to sell. Now I want my payout. Patience, my dear, Sterling purred. You will get your $2 million as soon as the deed is transferred. But tell me about the husband. How is poor Terrence taking it? Is he still crying about Daddy? Victoria laughed. It was a cruel sound, ugly and sharp. Oh God, he is such a mess, she said. And this is the part that broke me, the part that made me realize there was no redemption for her, the part that made me decide to destroy her completely. He is pathetic, Sterling, she said. He is sobbing in the other room, thinking he is saving his father. He actually believes I love him. He believes we are doing this for the family. The stupid black husband of mine has no idea. He is just a pawn. He is useful for his signature, and that is it. Once the house is sold, I am filing for divorce. I cannot stand his touch anymore. I cannot stand his smell. It smells like failure. He is weak, just like his father. And honestly, I am sick of pretending to like his people. I felt Coretta's hands Crush mine. Her nails dug into my skin. She was shaking, not with fear, with a mother's rage. We listened as Victoria continued spewing venom, describing Terrence as a dog she had trained to fool. She had played insulting his intelligence, his appearance, his very existence. She mocked the color of his skin to a man who had built a career on racism. She laughed about how easy it was to make him turn against us. I sat there in the dark listening to my son's wife strip him of his dignity. I looked at the audio file recording on the screen. It was saving every word, every insult, every admission of the conspiracy. This was not just evidence for a guardianship hearing. This was the key to unlocking Terrence's chains. It would break his heart, it would shatter his world, but it would save his soul. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at Coretta. Her eyes were dry, but they burned with a cold fire. "He needs to hear this," she said. Her voice was flat, final. "I know," I replied. "Not tomorrow," she said. "Tonight." Now I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The house was quiet, but the war had already started, and the first casualty was going to be Terrence's innocence. I stood up. I picked up the laptop. I walked down the hall to the guest room. I did not knock. I opened the door. Terrence was sleeping fitfully, tossing and turning in the sheets, trapping himself in a nightmare he did not know was real. I reached out and shook his shoulder. "Wake up, son," I said. He opened his eyes, groggy and confused. "Dad." "What is it? Is something wrong?" "Everything is wrong," I said. I set the laptop on the bedside table. One opened it. The screen glowed blue in the dark, illuminating his tired face. "I have something you need to hear, and I need you to be strong, because after this, nothing will ever be the same." I pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, clear and cruel, talking to her lover, talking about her husband, talking about the end of us all. I watched my son's face as he listened, watched the confusion turn to disbelief, then to horror, and finally to a devastation so deep it looked like physical pain. He was not just hearing his wife cheat, he was hearing the demolition of his entire life. And I sat there like a stone watching him break, because I knew that to build him back up, I first had to let him fall apart completely. I did not let him listen to the rest of the recording in the guest room because the walls of our house were too thin and the truth I was about to unleash was too loud for a suburban hallway. Victoria was sleeping just 30 feet away, dreaming of her millions, and I needed total isolation. I needed a place where a man could scream until his throat bled without the neighbors calling the police. I told Terrence to get dressed. He looked at me with confusion in his eyes, but he saw the iron in my face and he obeyed. We walked out to the truck in silence. The night air was cold and sharp. I drove us not to a coffee shop or a park, but to the old dispatch office at the edge of the shipyard. It was a brick building I had bought 40 years ago, the place where I made my first million, and the place where I buried my first failures. It was dusty and smelled of diesel and rust. It was the perfect place for an execution of the soul. Inside the office there was a single metal chair bolted to the floor in the center of the room. It was left over from the days when we had to interrogate drivers who were stealing cargo. I pointed to it. "Sit down, Terrence." He hesitated. He looked at the peeling paint on the walls and the darkness pressing against the barred windows. "Dad, what is going on?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why are we here?" I did not answer. I pushed him into the chair. I took a roll of duct tape from the desk drawer. I did not want to do this. Every instinct in my body revolted against the idea of binding my own son. But I knew him. I knew his weakness. When the pain became too much, he would try to run. He would try to cover his ears. He would try to flee back to the lie because the lie was comfortable. I could not let him run. I taped his wrists to the arms of the chair. "What are you doing?" he shouted, struggling against the tape. "Dad, stop this. You are scaring me. Are you crazy?" "I am not crazy," I said calmly. "I am a father trying to save his son from a burning building. But the son is too stupid to wake up, so I have to carry him out by force." I placed the laptop on a crate in front of him. I connected it to a set of industrial speakers. I wanted the voice to be big. I wanted it to surround him. I wanted it to be the voice of God delivering a judgment. "You asked me if Victoria knows about your job loss," I said. "You asked me if she loves you. You asked me why I hate her." I pressed the play button. The sound of Victoria's voice exploded in the small room. It was amplified, distorted slightly by the volume, but unmistakable. It was the conversation with Sterling. It started mid-sentence exactly where I had paused it in the bedroom. "He is pathetic, Sterling," she said. The words bounced off the brick walls. "He is sobbing in the other room, thinking he is saving his father. He actually believes I love him." I watched Terrence's face. At first, there was just confusion. He squinted at the speakers as if he could not process the language. "He believes we are doing this for the family," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with amusement. "The stupid black husband of mine has no idea he is just a pawn." Terrence flinched as if he had been whipped. His mouth opened. He pulled at the tape on his wrists. "Dad, turn it off," he begged. "Please. I do not want to hear this." "I did not turn it off. I turned it up. He is useful for his signature, and that is it," Victoria said. "Once the house is sold, I am filing for divorce. I cannot stand his touch anymore. I cannot stand his smell. It smells like failure." Terrence began to shake violently. The chair rattled against the concrete floor. Tears streamed down his face, but they were not tears of sadness yet. They were tears of shock. And honestly, Victoria's voice laughed a cruel, high-pitched sound. "I am sick of pretending to like his people. They are so loud, so emotional, always talking about struggle and history. I just want the money so I can go back to my own kind. Sterling, you promise me that once we get the land, I never have to see another one of them again." The racism was casual. It was comfortable. It was the kind of racism that lives in the bone. Terrence stopped struggling. He went still. He slumped in the chair. The reality of his marriage was stripping away layer by layer. The woman he worshipped, the woman he had gone into debt for, the woman he had betrayed his parents for, did not just use him. She despised his very existence. She despised his skin. She despised his heritage. "He is a dog, Sterling," she said. "A obedient little dog. I kick him and he licks my hand. I tell him to jump and he asks how high. It is almost too easy. Sometimes I want to spit in his face just to see if he will thank me for the moisture." Terrence let out a sound I had never heard from a human being. It was a howl, a long guttural scream of pure animal agony. He threw his head back and screamed at the ceiling. He screamed until his face turned purple. He screamed until he had no breath left. "Kill me," he gasped, choking on his own saliva. "Dad, please, just kill me. I want to die. Let me die." He began to slam his head against the back of the metal chair. He was trying to knock himself out. He was trying to end the pain. Bam, bam, bam. I stepped forward. I grabbed his hair and pulled his head forward, stopping him. "Look at me," I commanded. He would not open his eyes. He was sobbing uncontrollably, his body convulsing. "I cannot live with this," he wailed. "She was my life. I did everything for her. I sold my soul for her. And she thinks I am a dog. She hates me. Dad, she hates me. I am nothing. I am garbage. Just kill me. If you love me, kill me." He was broken. The man who walked into that room was dead. What sat in the chair was a pile of raw nerves and shame. He had reached the bottom. This was the moment. This was the turning point. I raised my hand and I slapped him. It was not a light slap. It was a strike with the full weight of my disappointment and my love. It cracked like a gunshot in the small room. His head snapped to the side. The sobbing stopped, abruptly replaced by a shocked silence. I grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at me. "You do not get to die," I hissed, my face inches from his. "Dying is easy. Dying is for cowards." "You dug this hole, Terrence. You invited this devil into our house. You gave her the keys. You gave her the knife she is using to cut your throat. And now you want to quit. You want to leave me and your mother to clean up your mess." Terrence stared at me, his eyes wide and vacant. "I am a dog," he whispered. She said, "I am a dog." "Then bite," I roared. I shook him. "She thinks you are a dog, fine. Then be a dog. But not her dog. Be my dog. Be the dog that guards the gate. Be the dog that rips the throat out of the intruder." I pulled a knife from my pocket. Terrence flinched. I cut the tape on his wrists. His arms fell to his sides, limp and red. "Stand up," I ordered. He did not move. "Stand up or I leave you here and I go finish this war alone." Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up. He swayed on his feet. He looked like a ghost. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice hollow. "She knows everything. She is winning." "She is not winning," I said. "She is gloating." And people who gloat make mistakes. She thinks she has broken you. She thinks she has won the game because she saw your cards, but she does not know I dealt the deck. I walked to the desk. I picked up a thick envelope I had prepared with Jada King 3 hours ago. It contained a set of documents. They looked official. They had seals. They had stamps. They were the deed to the house and the land transfer forms. But they were fake. They were a masterpiece of forgery created by my legal team to look exactly like the surrender of our assets. I handed the envelope to Terrence. "You have one job," I said. "One last role to play." Terrence looked at the envelope. "What is this?" "This is the bait," I said. "This is the victory she wants." I grabbed his shoulders. I needed him to focus. I needed him to bury his pain and become an actor. "You are going to go back to that house," I said. "You are going to walk into the bedroom. You are going to wake her up with a kiss. You are going to apologize for being weak. You are going to tell her that you convinced me. You are going to tell her that I broke, that I signed everything over." Terrence shook his head, terror returning to his eyes. I cannot kiss her. I cannot look at her. I will vomit. I will kill her." "You will not kill her," I said firmly. "You will kiss her. You will tell her you love her. You will tell her she was right all along. You will play the puppy one last time, Terrence. You will lick her hand. You will wag your tail. And you will hand her these papers." "Why?" he asked, tears leaking from his eyes again. "Why give her what she wants? Because when she signs these papers, she commits fraud," I said. "Because when she takes these papers to Sterling, she ties him to the crime. Because I need her to feel safe. I need her to feel triumphant. I need her to call her master and tell him the war is over. Because that is when they will meet. That is when they will expose themselves. And that is when we will close the trap." I looked deep into his eyes. "Can you do this, Terrence? Can you be the man who destroys her? Or are you the dog she says you are?" Terrence looked at the envelope. He looked at the speakers where her voice had destroyed him. He wiped the tears from his face. His expression changed. The sorrow evaporated, leaving behind something cold and hard, a hatred that matched my own. He took the envelope. His hand did not shake. "I will do it," he said. His voice was dead. "I will be the best puppy she has ever seen." "Good," I said. I drove him back to the house. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in colors of blood and bruises. We parked down the street. "Go," I said. "Make her believe you." Terrence got out of the truck. He adjusted his jacket. He practiced a smile in the side mirror. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a man who had already died and had nothing left to lose. He walked toward the house where his wife lay sleeping, dreaming of my destruction. He walked steadily. He opened the front door and stepped into the lion's den, armed with nothing but a lie and a broken heart. I waited in the truck, watching the bedroom window. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes. Then the light in the bedroom turned on. I saw shadows moving on the curtains. I saw Victoria's silhouette. She was jumping. She was dancing. She threw her arms up in victory. She had taken the bait. The hook was set. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jada King. "The tracker is active. We are live." I started the engine. The trap was not just sprung, it was tightening. And now we just had to follow the trail of blood to the man holding the leash. Sterling was waiting, and I was bringing him a storm. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and lies. I sat at the defendant table next to Jada King, my hands folded calmly on the polished wood. Across the aisle, Victoria sat dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue she had carefully crumpled for maximum effect. She was wearing a beige cardigan and a skirt that went below her knees. It was a costume. She was playing the role of the exhausted, heartbroken caregiver, forced to make a difficult decision for the good of the family. Beside her sat Dr. Evans, the man who had sold his medical license for a few $1,000s. The hearing for emergency guardianship was supposed to be a formality. In most cases, when a family presents video evidence of an elder losing their mind, the judge signs the papers before lunch. Victoria was counting on that speed. She needed the legal power to sign the deed to my house, and she needed it today. Judge Vance, a man with a face carved from granite, looked over his glasses at Victoria. "Please state your case, Mrs. Freeman," he said, his voice bored. Victoria stood up. She walked to the witness stand as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling perfectly, "it breaks my heart to be here. Augustus has been like a father to me. But over the last few months, his decline has been rapid and terrifying. He sees things that are not there. He becomes aggressive. He forgets who his own son is. She gestured to the large screen mounted on the wall. We have video evidence, Your Honor. We recorded it only because we wanted to show the doctors how bad it had gotten. It is painful to watch, but necessary. She nodded to her lawyer. The video played. There I was on the screen. The night of the dinner. I was on the floor screaming about rats. I was unbuckling my belt. I was dragging my leg. The audio was crisp. I heard myself yelling at Terrence, calling him Marcus. I heard myself sobbing for my mother. The courtroom was silent. I looked at the faces of the bailiff and the court reporter. They looked at me with pity. They saw a man whose mind had turned to mush. They saw a tragedy. I looked at Victoria. She was covering her mouth with her hand, feigning shock even though she was the one who had filmed it. She looked at me and for a second her mask slipped. She winked. A tiny, almost imperceptible wink. She thought she had already won. Dr. Evans took the stand next. He was a small man with sweaty hands. He adjusted his glasses and spoke with the arrogance of a man who believes his title protects him from scrutiny. Based on the video evidence and my review of Mr. Freeman's medical history, he said, using big words to hide small lies, "It is my professional opinion that he is suffering from rapid onset vascular dementia, compounded by paranoid psychosis. He is a danger to himself and others. He requires 24-hour supervision in a secure facility. The family is making the only responsible choice." The judge nodded. He picked up his pen. He looked ready to sign. The narrative was perfect. The evidence was visual. The expert had spoken. "Mr. Freeman," the judge said, looking at me, "do you have anything to say before I rule?" I did not speak. I looked at Jada King. Jada stood up. She did not look like a lawyer who was about to lose. She looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. She smoothed her suit jacket and picked up a single piece of paper from her briefcase. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy air of the room, "we do not dispute the behavior seen in the video. Mr. Freeman was indeed hallucinating. He was indeed losing motor control. He was indeed experiencing psychosis." Victoria smiled. She nudged her lawyer. They thought Jada was conceding. However, Jada continued, her voice dropping an octave. "We dispute the cause. Dr. Evans claims it is dementia. We claim it is poisoning." The word hung in the air. Poisoning. Victoria stopped smiling. Dr. Evans shifted in his seat. The judge stopped writing. Poisoning, the judge repeated. "That is a serious accusation, counselor. Do you have proof?" Jada walked toward the witness stand. She did not look at the judge. She looked directly at Dr. Evans. "Dr. Evans," she asked, "are you familiar with the compound scopolamine, also known as hyoscine?" Dr. Evans blinked, sweat beading on his forehead. "I am. It is a medication used for motion sickness, but in high doses it can cause hallucinations. And are you aware," Jada interrupted, "that when mixed with certain antipsychotics, it creates a state of high suggestibility and severe cognitive dissonance, mimicking the exact symptoms of dementia?" "I suppose it is theoretically possible," Evans stammered. "But there is no evidence that Mr. Freeman consumed such a cocktail." Jada turned to the judge. "Your Honor, 3 days ago, Mrs. Victoria Freeman prepared a meal for my client, a chicken pot pie. My client, suspicious of the sudden generosity after weeks of hostility, preserved a sample of that meal. He also fed a small portion to a stray cat, which immediately suffered a seizure." Victoria stood up. "Objection," she screamed. "This is ridiculous. He is making this up. He is paranoid, remember? Sit down, Mrs. Freeman," the judge barked. He looked at Jada. "Continue." "We sent the sample to an independent toxicology lab," Jada said, handing the paper to the bailiff. "This is the report. The food contained lethal levels of scopolamine and haloperidol, enough to scramble the brain of an elephant, let alone a 70-year-old man." She turned back to Evans. "So, doctor, my question is this. Did you diagnose a man with dementia because he was sick, or did you diagnose him because you were paid to cover up an attempted poisoning?" Evans went pale. He looked at Victoria. He looked at the door. I made my diagnosis based on the information provided by the family." He stuttered. If the patient was intoxicated, that was not disclosed to me. He was throwing her under the bus. The alliance of rats was beginning to eat itself. Victoria's face was a mask of pure terror. She looked at Terrence, who was sitting in the back row, head down, playing the part of the broken husband. She realized too late that the video she had filmed was not evidence of my madness. It was evidence of the crime. The judge read the report. His face grew dark. He looked at Victoria with a disgust that matched my own. "This court takes allegations of elder abuse and poisoning very seriously," he said. He slammed his gavel. "I am denying the petition for guardianship immediately. Furthermore, I am ordering a recess. I am forwarding this evidence to the district attorney's office. There will be a criminal investigation into the origin of these toxins." "Dr. Evans, do not leave the building," Victoria gasped. She grabbed her lawyer's arm. "Do something," she hissed. "Stop this." Her lawyer pulled his arm away. "I cannot stop a criminal investigation, Victoria," he whispered loud enough for me to hear. "If this report is real, you need a criminal defense attorney, not a family lawyer. I am done." The judge stood up and left the bench. The courtroom erupted into noise. Reporters who had been dozing in the back row were now typing furiously on their phones. I sat still. I looked at Victoria. She was shaking. She was looking around the room frantically, like a trapped animal searching for an exit. And then she looked toward the back of the courtroom. I followed her gaze. Sitting in the last row in the shadows was a man. He was wearing a hat pulled low and a long coat. He was not looking at the judge. He was looking at Victoria. It was Sterling. He did not look angry. He looked cold. He looked like a man who was calculating the cost of a failed investment. He raised his hand slowly. He made a gesture. He tapped his wrist where a watch would be. Then he made a flat cutting motion with his hand. It was a signal. "Time is up. Cut the losses. Sell." Victoria saw it. She swallowed hard. She understood. The legal route was dead. The slow game was over. The investigation would take time, but Sterling did not have time. He needed the land now. She looked at her lawyer, who was packing his briefcase. She looked at Dr. Evans, who was being questioned by a bailiff. She turned and looked at Terrence. I saw the change in her eyes. The panic vanished, replaced by a desperate, manic resolve. She remembered the envelope. The envelope Terrence had given her this morning. The fake deed. The fake transfer papers signed by me. She believed she still held the winning card. She believed that even if she went to jail later, she could still sell the land today. She could still get the millions Sterling had promised her. She could take the money and run. She grabbed her purse. She did not wait for Terrence. She did not look at me. She turned and ran out of the courtroom, her heels clacking loudly on the floor. I watched her go. Jada leaned over to me. "She is running," she said softly. I nodded. "She saw the signal," I said. "Sterling is here. He told her to liquidate. She is going to try to sell the land this afternoon." Jada smiled. "Then she is going to walk right into the final wall," she said. "The title company is ready. The police are on standby." I stood up. My knees popped. I felt tired, but it was a good tired. The kind of tired you feel after a long day of honest work. "Let us go," I said. "I want to see her face when the check bounces. I want to see her face when she realizes she sold a ghost to the devil." We walked out of the courtroom past Dr. Evans, who was sweating through his suit. We walked past the reporters. In the hallway, Terrence was waiting. He looked up as I approached. His eyes were red. "Did she leave?" he asked. "She is gone," I said. "She is going to sell the house, son. She thinks she has won." Terrence nodded. He took a deep breath. "Then let us finish this," he said. We walked out into the bright sunlight. The city was busy. People were rushing to lunch, unaware that a family was destroying itself a few blocks away. I got into my truck. Terrence got in the passenger side. Jada followed in her car. We drove not to my house, but to the offices of the Sterling Development Group. It was a glass tower downtown, the place where Victoria thought she was going to collect her reward. She did not know that the reward for treason is never gold. It is always lead. I gripped the steering wheel. The final act was beginning. The lawyer had done her part. The doctor had done his. Now it was time for the money to talk. And when money talks in my world, it usually says goodbye. The glass doors of the Sterling Development Group headquarters hissed shut behind Victoria, and she walked out onto the pavement with a strut that could have cracked the concrete beneath her heels. I watched her from across the street, sitting in the cab of my truck with the engine idling low. She was clutching a leather portfolio to her chest as if it contained the crown jewels. In a way, to her, it did. Inside that folder was the check for $2 million. It was the deposit for the land she believed she had just sold. It was the down payment on her freedom from me, from Terrence, and from the life she despised. Inside the tower, Arthur Sterling was likely pouring himself a scotch, celebrating the acquisition of the final piece of his empire. He believed he had won. He believed that the document Victoria had handed him, the one with my forged signature and Terrence's desperate scribble, was the key to the $15 million terminal expansion. He had run a preliminary title search, but my team had been careful. The fake deed Terrence gave her was a masterpiece of deception. It referenced an old land survey number 1 that looked legitimate, but pointed to a worthless strip of swamp 10 miles south. By the time Sterling's lawyers realized the geographical error, the money would already be moved. Victoria did not go to the bank to pay off her husband's debts. She did not go to pay the rent on their apartment. She did not go to buy groceries for her daughter. She went straight to the Diamond District. I watched her enter a jewelry store. She emerged 20 minutes later wearing a watch that cost more than my first house. She hailed a limousine, not a taxi. She was spending the money before the ink was even dry on the deposit slip. She was drunk on power. She was intoxicated by the sudden influx of wealth she had done nothing to earn. She directed the driver to the Olympus Hotel, the most expensive venue in the city. She rented the presidential suite. She did not call Terrence to tell him the good news. She did not call me to gloat. Not yet. She called her friends. She called the sycophants and the hangers on the people who had laughed at my truck at the gate. I drove home to Coretta. We sat in the kitchen and we watched the digital trap close. Jada King had set up a monitoring system on the bank account Terrence shared with Victoria. We watched the deposit hit, $2 million. A number with 6 zeros. A number that would solve all their problems if they were smart. But Victoria was not smart. She was hungry. 10 minutes after the deposit landed, the withdrawals began. $50,000 for the hotel, $20,000 for catering, $10,000 for a DJ. She was burning through the cash like it was paper kindling. She was throwing a victory party. "It is time," Coretta said softly, looking at the screen. I nodded. "It is time," I agreed. I picked up the phone. I did not call the police. Not yet. I called the trustee of the Maya Education Trust. It was a man named Mr. Henderson, a banker who had managed my affairs for 20 years. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "it appears there has been a fraudulent attempt to transfer assets belonging to the trust. A large sum of unauthorized money has been deposited into an account associated with the fraud. I believe the authorities need to be notified immediately." Henderson did not ask questions. He knew the play. "I am on it, Mr. Freeman," he said. "The FBI Financial Crimes Division is already tracking the account from the previous investigation. I will give them the green light." I hung up. Now we just had to wait for the show. Victoria did not disappoint. At 8 o'clock that evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. She was live streaming again. I opened the app. Coretta leaned in over my shoulder. The video showed the interior of the presidential suite. It was lavish, filled with white roses and gold balloons. People were dancing, drinking champagne, shouting over the thumping bass of the music. And there, in the center of it all, was Victoria. She was wearing a gold dress. She held a bottle of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were wild. "Hello, world," she screamed into the camera. "Look at this! Look at us! We made it!" She spun the camera around, showing the party, showing the city lights below, showing the expensive watch on her wrist. "They said we were broke," she shouted. "They said we were nothing. The old man tried to cut us off. He tried to starve us. Well, guess what, Augustus? I just sold your precious dirt for $10 million. She laughed. It was a maniacal sound. "We got the deposit today," she continued. $2 million cash, and the rest is coming next week. And you know what the best part is? We do not need you anymore. We do not need your truck. We do not need your charity. You are going to rot in a state home, and I am going to be sipping mimosas in Paris." She walked over to a table where a stack of cash was sitting. She had actually withdrawn thousands of dollars just to display it. She fanned herself with a stack of hundreds. "This is what winning looks like," she sneered at the lens. "This is what happens when you mess with me." I took what was mine. I took what Terrence was too weak to take. I am the queen of this city. The viewer count on the stream was climbing. People were watching in horror and fascination. The comments were scrolling fast. Most of them were congratulating her, unaware of the crime she was confessing to. But then the mood in the room changed. In the background of the video, I heard a sound that was not music. It was a loud, rhythmic banging. Victoria frowned. She turned toward the door of the suite. "Who invited the drummer?" she slurred. The banging came again, louder. "Open up! Police! The music cut out. The guests froze. Victoria stared at the door. She looked at the camera. Her face went pale. "What is going on?" she whispered. Then the double doors of the suite exploded inward. It was not a drummer. It was a tactical entry team from the Financial Crimes Task Force. They swarmed into the room wearing vests that said, "Federal Agent" in big yellow letters. They had guns drawn. "Nobody move," an agent shouted. "Hands where I can see them." The guests screamed. Some dropped their drinks. Some tried to run toward the balcony. Victoria stood frozen in the center of the room, the stack of cash still in her hand, the phone still broadcasting live to the world. "Victoria Freeman," a voice boomed. A man in a suit walked through the door. He looked calm. He looked professional. He walked straight up to her. "I am Special Agent Miller. You are under arrest." Victoria blinked. She looked at the agent. She looked at the phone. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a squeak. "Arrest," she said. "For what?" "Being rich. This is my party. Get out." "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and grand larceny," Agent Miller said. Victoria dropped the money. "Larceny," she screeched. "I sold a property. It was legal. I have the papers. My husband signed them. It is our land." Agent Miller shook his head. He pulled a document from his jacket pocket. He held it up to her face. He held it up to the camera. "This is the deed to the property located at 4500 River Road," he said. "The property you purported to sell to the Sterling Group today?" "Yes," Victoria said, defiant. "My in-law's house. Terrence has power of attorney. We sold it. This property does not belong to Augustus Freeman." Agent Miller said, his voice cutting through the silence of the room. "It has not belonged to him for 5 years." Victoria froze. "What?" she whispered. "This property is owned by the Maya Education Trust," Agent Miller explained. "It is an irrevocable trust set up for the benefit of your daughter, Maya Freeman. The trustee is the First National Bank. Neither Augustus Freeman nor Terrence Freeman has the legal authority to sell, transfer, or encumber this asset." The words hit her like physical blows. "Trust," she stammered. "Maya." "You sold a property you do not own," Agent Miller said. "You accepted a $2 million deposit for an asset you have no right to sell. That is fraud, ma'am, and the money you are spending right now, that is stolen money." Victoria looked at the phone. She looked at the thousands of people watching her fall. She looked at the gold balloons. She looked at the fake friends who were now backing away from her as if she were contagious. "But Sterling," she gasped. "Arthur Sterling." He checked. He said it was fine. "Arthur Sterling is currently being questioned for attempting to purchase protected trust assets," Agent Miller said. "But right now we are talking about you." He gestured to the agents behind him. "Cuff her!" Victoria screamed. It was a high, piercing sound of pure denial. "No!" she yelled, kicking as the agents grabbed her arms. "No, this is a mistake. My husband signed it. Arrest him. It was his idea. He told me to do it." She was throwing Terrence under the bus, live on camera. She was blaming the man she had manipulated, the man she had called a dog. "We will be speaking with Mr. Freeman as well," Agent Miller said, tightening the handcuffs. "But you are the one who took the check. You are the one who signed the sale agreement. And you are the one spending the money." They dragged her toward the door. She twisted her head, looking back at the phone, which was still propped up on a table, still streaming. "Augustus," she screamed, her face contorted with hate and fear. "Augustus, help me. Tell them it is my house. You owe me. You owe me." I watched from my kitchen. I took a sip of my tea. "I owe you nothing." "Victoria," I said to the screen. An agent noticed the phone. He walked over to it. He looked into the lens. He reached out a gloved hand. The stream ended. The room went dark. Coretta let out a long breath. "It is done," she said. "Not yet," I said. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked out at the dark street. "Sterling lost $2 million tonight," I said. "He thinks I tricked him. He thinks I stole his money. He is not going to call his lawyers, Coretta. He is going to call his cleaners." Coretta looked at me alarmed. "What do we do?" she asked. "We wait," I said. "Victoria is in jail. Terrence is in the hospital of his own misery. But Sterling is out there, and a man like that does not accept defeat. He escalates." I went to the closet in the hallway. I reached up to the top shelf. I pulled down a heavy metal box. I opened it. Inside lay the tools of my past life, a set of heavy brass knuckles, a burner phone, and a list of names. Names of men who worked the docks, men who owed me favors, men who hated Arthur Sterling as much as I did. "He is going to come for us," I said, closing the box. "He is going to try to take what he thinks is his." "Let him come," Coretta said, her voice hard. I smiled. It was a grim smile. "Oh, he is coming," I said. "But he is forgetting one thing. He is coming to a house built on $15 million of concrete and steel. And he is coming for a man who learned to fight before he learned to walk." The party was over. The hangover was just beginning. And Arthur Sterling was about to find out that the only thing more dangerous than a man with nothing to lose is a man with everything to protect. The night did not end with the arrest. It merely shifted venues. Victoria managed to post bail 3 hours after being booked. She used the last of the cash she had hidden in a safe deposit box, cash she had skimmed from my accounts over the months. She did not go to her parents. She did not go to the hospital to see the husband she had thrown to the wolves. She went to the only person she thought could save her. She went to Arthur Sterling. She took a taxi to the industrial district to a private hangar Sterling owned near the old airfield. She thought she was going to a partner. She thought they were going to brainstorm a legal defense. She thought her beauty and her willingness to betray her family still held value. She was wrong. I know this because Sterling wanted me to know. He wanted me to see the consequences of defying him. He had security cameras in the hangar, and he sent me the footage later as a warning. The video was grainy and black and white. It showed Victoria walking into the hangar. Her gold dress was torn. Her makeup was smeared. She looked like a broken doll. Sterling was standing by a desk looking at a tablet. 2 of his bodyguards stood in the shadows. "Arthur," she cried, running toward him. "You have to help me." They froze the accounts. They took the money back. "You have to fix this." Sterling did not look up. He kept scrolling on the tablet. "The money is gone, Victoria," he said. His voice was calm, devoid of emotion. $2 million, returned to the trust. And the land deal. Void. "But we can fight it," she pleaded, grabbing his arm. "We can sue. My husband signed the papers. It is legal." Sterling looked at her then. He looked at her hand on his expensive suit. He peeled her fingers off one by one. "You sold me a swamp, Victoria," he said. "My surveyors just came back. The deed you gave me references a parcel of land 10 miles south of the terminal. It is underwater. You sold me mud." Victoria froze. She stepped back, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "That is impossible. Terrence gave me the envelope. Augustus gave it to him." Sterling laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "The old man played you," he said. "He played us both. He baited the trap and you walked right into it. You are useless to me now." Victoria began to cry. She tried to use the only weapon she had left. She tried to seduce him. She moved closer, touching her hair, trying to look alluring through the wreckage of her night. "Arthur, please," she said. "We are partners. We are close. I can still help you. I know his secrets." Sterling slapped her. It was not a slap of passion. It was a backhand of dismissal. It knocked her to the concrete floor. She slid across the oil-stained ground. She looked up at him, blood trickling from her lip. "You are nothing," Sterling spat. "You are a liability. You led the feds right to my door. You cost me money, and now you are going to pay for it." He nodded to his bodyguards. "Teach her a lesson," he said, "and then throw her out." The video cut to black. I sat in my kitchen staring at the blank screen of my phone. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no joy. Victoria was a monster, but she was the mother of my grandchild. And seeing her beaten by a man like Sterling was a reminder that I was not dealing with a white-collar criminal. I was dealing with a butcher. An hour later, my phone rang. The number was blocked. I knew who it was. I put the phone on speaker. Coretta stood next to me, her hand on my shoulder. "Hello, Arthur," I said. "Hello," Augustus Sterling replied. His voice was smooth, cultured, and deadly. "I assume you saw the video. Your daughter-in-law has a glass jaw." "She is not my daughter-in-law," I said. "Not anymore." "Fair enough," Sterling said. "She was a bad investment. But you and I, Augustus, we have unfinished business. You embarrassed me tonight. You stole $2 million from me. You made me look like a fool in front of my investors. You tried to steal my land, Arthur," I said. "You tried to poison me. You tried to destroy my family. We are even. We are not even." Sterling roared, his composure cracking. I want that terminal. I want that land, and I am going to get it. You will get nothing, I said. The police are already building a case against you. The fraud unit has the transfer records. You are finished, Arthur. Go back to your hole. There was a silence on the line, a heavy breathing silence. You think you have won, Sterling said softly. You think because you have lawyers and cops you are safe. You forgot the rules of the Port Augustus. You forgot how we settle things. I did not forget, I said, good Sterling said, because I have something of yours, something much more valuable than land. My blood ran cold. What do you have, I asked. I have a little bird, Sterling said, a little bird named Maya. The world stopped. The kitchen vanished. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. Maya, I whispered. She is very cute, Sterling said. She was sleeping so soundly when my men picked her up from the nanny service. You really should pay for better security, Augustus. Let her go, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had never felt before. She is a child. This is between us. It is between us. Sterling agreed. And she is the currency. Here is the deal, Augustus. You have 2 hours. You bring me $20 million in cash. Or you sign over the deed to the land. The real deed, not the swamp. And if I do not, I asked, then you can pick her up at the port, Sterling said, piece by piece. He hung up. Coretta let out a scream. She collapsed onto the floor sobbing. My baby, she cried. He has my baby. I knelt down and held her. I rocked her back and forth, but my mind was not crying. My mind was calculating. Sterling had made a mistake, a fatal mistake. He thought he was kidnapping a child to leverage a businessman. He did not realize he was kidnapping the granddaughter of the man who ran the logistics for the entire eastern seaboard for 30 years. I stood up. I helped Coretta to a chair. Call the police, she said, wiping her eyes. Call Agent Miller. No, I said. Agent Miller is a good man, but he follows the law. He will set up a perimeter. He will call in negotiators. He will wait. And while he waits, Sterling might panic. Sterling might hurt her. I walked to the hallway closet. I pulled down the metal box. I took out the burner phone. We are not calling the police, Coretta, I said. We are calling the family. Not the blood family. The other family. The family of Sweat and Diesel. The family of the road. I dialed a number I had not called in 10 years. It rang twice. Yeah, a deep voice answered. Big Mike, I said. It is Augustus. There was a pause. Then the voice warmed up. Boss. It has been a long time. I heard you were retired. I was, I said. But a man named Arthur Sterling just took my granddaughter. The silence on the other line was different this time. It was the silence of a man picking up a hammer. Sterling, Big Mike said. I thought we ran him out of town in the 90s. He is back, I said. He is at the old shipyard. He wants money. He wants land. What do you need? Boss Big Mike asked. I need noise, I said. I need iron. I need every driver within 100 miles. I want to shut down the city. I want to surround him. I want him to know that he did not just touch a nerve. He touched the third rail. Say no more, Big Mike said. I will hit the radio. Give us 20 minutes. I hung up. I put the brass knuckles in my pocket. I put on my old leather jacket. It smelled of oil and memories. I walked out to my truck. Coretta followed me. I am coming with you, she said. No, I said. You stay here. In case he calls. In case she comes home. Coretta grabbed my lapel. She looked me in the eyes. Bring her back, Augustus. Bring her back or do not come back at all. I kissed her forehead. I will bring her back, I promised. I climbed into the truck. I started the engine. It roared to life, a familiar, comforting sound. I pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the highway. As I drove, I turned on the CB radio. It had been silent for years, but now it was alive. Breaker 19, this is Big Mike calling all haulers. We have a code red. The boss needs us. Destination Westside Terminal. This is not a drill. I repeat, not a drill. Let us roll. Static crackled. Then a voice answered. This is Red Dog on I-95. I am rolling. This is Tanker Tom. I am 10 minutes out. I am rolling. This is Ironsides. I have 6 boys with me. We are rolling. One by one the voices chimed in. Voices from the north, voices from the south. Voices of men I had helped. Men I had hired when no one else would. Men whose families I had fed during the strikes. I looked in my rearview mirror. Behind me on the highway, a pair of headlights appeared, then 2, then 10, then 50. They were massive 18-wheelers, dump trucks, flatbeds. Their air horns blasted, shattering the night silence. Their lights turned the highway into day. They were forming a convoy, a steel river flowing toward the port. I was not just an old man in a Ford pickup anymore. I was the spearhead of an army of iron and anger. I pressed the accelerator. The engine growled. "Hold on, Maya," I whispered. "Grandpa is coming, and he is bringing hell with him." I walked into the warehouse alone. The metal doors groaned on their rusted hinges as I pushed them open, stepping into the vast, cavernous space that smelled of diesel oil and old seawater. It was a smell I knew better than the scent of my own home. It was the smell of the port, the smell of my youth, the smell of the empire I had built with my bare hands. But tonight, it smelled like a tomb. The warehouse was dimly lit by flickering halogen bulbs that hung from the ceiling like dying stars. In the center of the concrete floor, illuminated by a single harsh spotlight, stood Arthur Sterling. He looked out of place in his Italian suit, his polished shoes gleaming against the grime of the floor. He held a pistol in his hand. It was a small silver thing, a rich man's toy, but it was deadly enough. Behind him, 2 of his hired thugs stood guard, their arms crossed, their faces impassive. And there on a wooden pallet sat my granddaughter Maya. She was bound with zip ties, her mouth covered with duct tape. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terror that no child should ever know. Beside her lay Victoria. She was also bound, but she was not sitting. She was curled on the floor, her face bruised and swollen, her gold dress torn and stained with grease. She looked up when I entered, and I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a desperate plea for salvation from the man she had despised. Sterling smiled when he saw me. It was the smile of a wolf who sees a sheep wandering into its den. "Augustus," he called out, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "You came alone. How noble and how stupid." I stopped 10 feet away from him. I kept my hands visible at my sides. I did not look at Maya. If I looked at her, I would lose my focus. I would lose the cold rage that was keeping me steady. I looked only at Sterling. "I am here, Arthur," I said, my voice flat. "Let the girl go." Sterling laughed. He stepped down from the platform he was standing on and walked toward me, the gun dangling casually at his side. "You are in no position to make demands, old man," he sneered. "You are on my property now. You are in my world. Where is the money? Where is my $20 million? I did not bring the money." "Arthur," I said. Sterling stopped. His smile vanished. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at my chest. "Then you came here to die," he said. "You think you can talk your way out of this? You think you are still the king of the docks? Look at you, Augustus. You are an old man in a leather jacket driving a rusted truck. You are nothing. You are a relic. I won. I have the land. I have the power. And now I am going to have the pleasure of ending you." He looked over at Victoria. "And her," he added. "She failed me. You failed me. Everyone fails me. But I always collect what is owed." He cocked the hammer of the gun. The click was loud in the silence. "Say goodbye, Augustus." I looked him in the eye. I did not blink. "I did not bring money, Arthur," I repeated, "and I did not come alone." Sterling frowned. He looked around the empty warehouse. "Who is with you? Your ghost stories, your memories?" "There is no one here." I checked my watch. "Listen," I said. Sterling paused. He cocked his head. At first there was only the sound of the wind rattling the corrugated metal roof. Then came a low vibration, a rumble that started in the floor and traveled up through the soles of my boots. It grew louder. It was a deep, guttural roar, like the earth itself was growling. Sterling looked confused. "What is that?" he asked. "That I said is the sound of the Union." Then the air horns began. It was not one horn. It was 100, a deafening cacophony of sound that blasted through the walls, shattering the windows high above. It was the scream of the convoy. It was the war cry of the men who move the world. The walls of the warehouse shook. Dust rained down from the rafters. Sterling covered his ears, stumbling back. His thugs looked around in panic, reaching for their weapons. Then the wall behind me exploded. It did not just open, it was torn apart. A massive Mack truck painted cherry red with a grill guard made of reinforced steel smashed through the corrugated metal siding. The metal screamed as it was ripped from the frame. The truck roared into the warehouse, its headlights blindingly bright, illuminating the dark corners like the sun. behind it came another, and another. They poured into the space surrounding Sterling and his men, forming a wall of steel and chrome. The doors of the trucks flew open. Men jumped out. They were not soldiers. They were not police. They were bigger. They were dock workers. They were longshoremen. They were truckers. Men with arms like tree trunks and hands like anvils. They carried tire irons, heavy chains, and baseball bats. They did not shout. They did not run. They walked with the slow, terrifying momentum of a glacier. Big Mike was in the lead, holding a crowbar that looked like a toothpick in his massive hand. He looked at Sterling. He spat on the floor. "You messed with the wrong family," Arthur Mike growled. Sterling spun around, waving his gun wildly. "Stay back," he screamed, his voice cracking with fear. "I will shoot. I will kill them all." He ran back toward the pallet where Maya sat. He grabbed her by the arm, hauling her up. He pressed the barrel of the gun against her temple. "Back off," he shrieked, "or the girl dies." The workers stopped. The silence returned heavy and suffocating. I stepped forward. "Arthur," I said, "look around you. There are 50 men here. You have 6 bullets. You do the math." "I do not care," Sterling yelled, dragging Maya backward toward a side exit. "I am leaving, and she is coming with me. Anyone moves, she dies." He was panicked. He was irrational. His finger was trembling on the trigger. I saw the madness in his eyes. He knew he had lost, and he wanted to take something precious with him. I tensed, preparing to rush him, knowing I would never be fast enough, but I was not the only one moving. From the shadows of the machinery near the back wall, a figure emerged. It was not one of the workers. It was a man in a torn suit with a face streaked with tears and dirt. It was Terrence. He had snuck in while the trucks were breaching the wall. He had been hiding, waiting, watching his daughter with a gun to her head. He did not look like the weak man who had begged for money. He did not look like the coward who had lied to his wife. In that moment, he looked like a father. He saw the gun. He saw the fear in Maya's eyes. He saw the distance between Sterling and the door. He did not hesitate. He did not think. He ran. He launched himself from the shadows, a scream tearing from his throat. "No," he roared. Sterling turned at the sound. He saw Terrence coming. He swung the gun away from Maya toward the charging man. Terrence did not stop. He dove. The gun went off. The sound was a flat crack distinct from the roar of the engines. Terrence's body jerked in midair. The bullet hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around, but his momentum carried him forward. He crashed into Sterling, tackling him to the concrete. They rolled on the floor, a tangle of limbs and desperation. The gun skid away across the floor. Maya screamed. Big Mike moved faster than a man his size should be able to. He reached the pile. He reached down and grabbed Sterling by the collar of his expensive suit. He lifted him into the air with one hand. Sterling flailed, kicking and punching, but Mike just shook him like a rag doll. Then Mike pulled back his other fist and delivered a single blow to Sterling's jaw. There was a sickening crunch. Sterling went limp, his eyes rolling back in his head. Mike dropped him on the floor. "It is over," Mike said. I ran to Terrence. He was lying on his back, clutching his shoulder. Blood was seeping through his fingers, dark and thick, pooling on the concrete. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. "Terrence!" I shouted, falling to my knees beside him. "Son!" He looked up at me. His eyes were unfocused, but he smiled, a weak, bloody smile. Did I do it, Dad?" he whispered. "Is she safe?" I looked over at Maya. One of the truckers had cut her bonds. She was running toward us, crying. "She is safe, son," I said, pressing my hand over his wound to stanch the bleeding. "You saved her. You did it." Terrence closed his eyes. "I am not a dog," he whispered. "No, son," I said, tears streaming down my face. "You are a lion." The warehouse was filled with the sound of men moving, but I heard nothing but my son's ragged breathing. The paramedics were coming. Big Mike had called them on the radio, but every second felt like an hour. I looked up. Sterling was unconscious, a broken heap on the floor. His thugs had been subdued by the workers tied up with their own zip ties. And in the corner sat Victoria. No one had touched her. No one had untied her. She sat there watching the scene unfold with eyes wide with horror. She looked at Terrence lying in a pool of blood. She looked at me holding him. She looked at the army of men standing guard. I stood up. My hands were covered in my son's blood. I walked over to her. She shrank back against the pallet, trembling violently. "Augustus," she whimpered, I did not know he would do that. I did not know he had a gun. Please." I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had called us unimportant, the woman who had sold a fake deed, the woman who had brought this violence into our lives. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt nothing. She was not a monster. She was just a small, greedy thing that had tried to eat at the table of giants and had been crushed by the silverware. I reached down and pulled the duct tape off her mouth. She gasped for air. "Look at him," I said, pointing at Terrence. "Look at what you did." I did not pull the trigger," she sobbed. "No," I said. "You just loaded the gun. You just led the wolf to the door." I leaned in close, my face inches from hers. "You wanted a world of money, Victoria," I whispered. "You wanted a world of power. You wanted to play the game of kings." I gestured to the bloody floor, to the unconscious Sterling, to the rough men holding iron bars. "Well, here it is," I said. "This is the world you wanted to enter. This is what it costs. It costs blood. It costs family. It costs your soul." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Help me," she begged. "Untie me. Let me go. I will disappear. I promise." I stood up. I wiped my hands on my jacket. "I cannot help you, Victoria," I said. "You are already dead. You died the moment you touched my granddaughter." I turned my back on her. "Watch her," I said to Big Mike. "Do not let her leave. The police can have her." I walked back to my son. I took his hand. I held it until the sirens wailed in the distance, until the blue lights flashed against the walls, until the paramedics rushed in to take him away. The confrontation was over. The violence had ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than any noise. It was the silence of a debt paid in full. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors and the hiss of the oxygen tank. I sat in a plastic chair in the corner, watching my son sleep. Terrence looked small in the hospital bed. His shoulder was wrapped in thick bandages, and his leg was elevated in a cast that went from his toes to his hip. The doctors had spent 12 hours in surgery piecing him back together. They had saved his arm, but the damage to his leg was permanent. The bullet had shattered the femur and severed the nerves. He would walk again, but he would never run. He would carry a limp for the rest of his life, a constant physical reminder of the night he finally stood up. When he woke up, his eyes were cloudy with morphine. He looked around the room, panicked, until he saw me. He tried to sit up, but the pain slammed him back down. "Dad," he rasped. "Maya." "She is safe," I said, standing up and pouring him a cup of water with a straw. "She is with your mother. She is asking for you." Terrence closed his eyes and let out a long breath. A tear leaked out and ran into his ear. "And Victoria?" he asked. "She is in jail," I said, "where she belongs." Terrence nodded slowly. He did not ask to see her. He did not ask if she was okay. The spell was broken. The bullet that hit him had killed the infatuation. 2 days later, a lawyer arrived. It was not Jada King. It was a public defender assigned to Victoria. He looked tired and apologetic. He stood at the foot of Terrence's bed holding a clipboard. "Mr. Freeman," the lawyer said, "my client is requesting a visitation. She says she needs to explain. She says she was coerced. She wants to see her husband." I stood up, ready to throw the man out, but Terrence spoke first. His voice was weak, but the steel I had seen at the warehouse was still there. "I do not have a wife," he said, staring at the ceiling. "My wife died the moment she sold my daughter to a monster. The woman in that cell is a stranger. Tell her I said to rot." The lawyer nodded and left. Terrence looked at me. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. "For the leg, for the mess, for everything." I put my hand on his good shoulder. "Do not apologize for the leg, son," I said. "That limp is a medal of honor. It proves you fought. It proves you are a Freeman. We can buy new houses. We can make more money. But we cannot buy courage. And you found yours." He managed a weak smile. It was the first real smile I had seen on his face in years. Recovery was slow. The police took his statement in the hospital room. He told them everything. He admitted to the fraud with the deed. He admitted to the lies. But because he had saved Maya, and because I refused to press charges against him, the district attorney agreed to a plea deal. Probation and community service. He would have a record, but he would be free. Victoria was not so lucky. The charges against her were piling up like snow in a blizzard. kidnapping, grand larceny, conspiracy to commit murder. The feds had her cold on the wire fraud. The state had her on the kidnapping. She was looking at 20 years minimum. But Victoria was a survivor, or at least she thought she was. She was a rat who would chew through her own leg to escape a trap. And she had one last card to play, or so she thought. A week after Terrence was discharged and moved back into his old room in my house, a letter arrived. It was sent from the county jail. The envelope was cheap government issue paper. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. It was addressed to Terrence. We sat at the kitchen table. Coretta made coffee. Terrence stared at the envelope for a long time. He did not want to open it. "Burn it," he said. "Open it," I said. "You need to see this. You need to see the end of the story." He tore it open. He read it in silence. His face went pale, then red. He handed the letter to me. "My dearest Terrence," the letter began. "I know you are angry. I know things look bad. But you have to listen to me. I did it for us. I did it for our future. I was scared. Sterling threatened me. I had no choice. But there is something you do not know. Something wonderful. I am pregnant, Terrence. I took a test in the infirmary this morning. We are going to have a baby. A son. You cannot let your son be born in prison. You cannot let the state take him away. Please, Terrence, drop the charges. Tell your father to pay the bail. We can start over. Just the three of us. I love you. Your Victoria." I put the letter down. The audacity was breathtaking. She was using an unborn child as a shield. She was trying to manipulate the man she had called a dog by promising him a puppy. Terrence looked at me. His eyes were wide with a mix of horror and doubt. "Is it possible?" he asked. "Could she be pregnant?" "It is possible," I said. "She is a young woman." He put his head in his hands. "If it is mine, Dad, if that is my child in there, I cannot leave him. I cannot let him grow up in the system like you found me. I have to help her." The guilt was eating him. He was a good man, a man who would sacrifice himself for a child. Victoria knew that. She was banking on it. I stood up. I walked to the safe in my office. I spun the dial. I reached past the deeds and the cash to a thin manila folder at the very back. It was a file I had hoped never to open. A file that contained a tragedy from 5 years ago. I walked back to the kitchen. I placed the folder on the table in front of Terrence. "She is lying, son," I said. He looked at the folder. "How do you know?" he asked. "Because I know your medical history better than she does," I said. "Open it." Terrence opened the folder. Inside was a medical report from the university hospital dated 5 years ago. It was from the time he had been hospitalized with a severe testicular infection, a complication from a sports injury he had ignored. He read the report. He read the surgical notes. He read the final prognosis signed by the urologist. Sterility confirmed. Reversal impossible. He stared at the words. He had been so sick back then, so out of it with fever and pain that he had likely blocked out the doctor's words. Or maybe he had chosen to forget because the truth was too painful for a young man to accept. We had never talked about it. We let him heal and we moved on. "I forgot," he whispered. "God, I forgot." He looked up at me. The tears in his eyes were different now. They were tears of relief. "I cannot have children," he said. "No," I said gently. "You cannot. So if she is pregnant," Terrence said, his voice hardening into stone, "if she is pregnant, I finished for him. It is not yours." Sterling. The name hung in the air like smoke. It made sense. The late nights, the secret calls, the contempt she held for Terrence. She had been sleeping with the enemy long before the kidnapping. She had been carrying Sterling's child while she plotted to kill Terrence's parents. "It is the final nail," Terrence said, closing the folder. He picked up the letter. He crumpled it in his fist. "Send her the file," he said. I nodded. "I will send it," I said, "and I will make sure she gets it today." I called Jada King. I told her what to do. She sent a courier to the jail with a copy of the medical report. She attached a note from her firm. "Dear Ms. Freeman, my client Terrence Freeman is in receipt of your letter regarding your pregnancy. Please find attached a certified medical report dating from 5 years ago confirming Mr. Freeman's complete and irreversible sterility. As such, Mr. Freeman denies paternity and has filed for immediate divorce on the grounds of adultery. Furthermore, he has requested that the district attorney be informed of this new development as it pertains to your motive and character. Good luck with your defense. I did not go to the jail to see her read it. I did not need to. But the guard who delivered the mail was an old friend of Big Mike's. He told me what happened. He said Victoria was sitting in the common room trying to rally support from the other inmates playing the victim, telling them her rich husband had abandoned her and her unborn baby. He handed her the envelope. She tore it open eagerly, thinking it was a check or a letter of forgiveness. She read the note. She looked at the medical report. She read it again. The guard said she made a sound that he would never forget. It was not a scream. It was a gasp that sucked all the air out of the room. Her face went gray. She dropped the paper. She stood up and backed away from the table, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "No, that is not true." Then she started to scream. She screamed until her throat was raw. She screamed at the walls. She screamed at the ceiling. She threw her tray against the bars. She clawed at her own face. It was the scream of a gambler who had bet everything on a bluff and had been called. It was the scream of a woman who realized she was carrying the child of a man who was going to prison for life, a man who had beaten her and left her to rot. She was alone. She was pregnant, in prison. And the door to her old life was not just closed, it was welded shut. They had to sedate her. They moved her to the psychiatric wing for observation. When Big Mike told me this, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. It was done. The toxicity was purged. I went out to the porch where Terrence was sitting. He was watching Maya play in the yard. His arm was in a sling and his leg was propped up, but he looked peaceful. "She got the letter," I said, sitting down beside him. He nodded. He did not ask what happened. He just watched his daughter chasing a butterfly in the sunlight. "It is over, Dad," he said. "Yes, son," I said. "It is over. Now we rebuild. We had scars. We had wounds that would ache when it rained, but we were free." And as I watched my son smile at his daughter, I knew that the price we paid was high, but it was worth it. We had bought back our souls. The physical wounds were healing, but the wounds in Terrence's mind were festering. 3 weeks after the hospital discharge, I found him in the garage. It was 2 a.m. The house was silent. I had woken up for a glass of water and saw the light under the garage door. I opened it quietly. Terrence was sitting in the driver's seat of my old Ford truck. The engine was not running, but the garage door was closed. He was just sitting there, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white, staring into the dark, cluttered shelves of tools. On the passenger seat lay a bottle of pain medication, the strong stuff the doctors gave him for his leg. It was uncapped. I did not shout. I walked over to the driver's side door and opened it. Terrence jumped. He looked at me with eyes that were hollow and dead. He looked like a man who had run out of road. "I cannot do it, Dad," he whispered. "The shame. It is too heavy. Every time I close my eyes, I see the gun. I see Maya tied up. I see you walking into that warehouse alone because I was too weak to protect my own family. I am a failure. I am poison. Everyone I touch gets hurt." He reached for the bottle of pills. "It is better if I go," he said. "You have Maya. You have Mom. You do not need me. I am just a reminder of the mistake." I reached into the cab and slapped the bottle out of his hand. The pills scattered across the floor of the truck, rattling like bones. "Get out," I ordered. "Dad, please," he sobbed. "Get out," I roared. He stumbled out of the truck, favoring his bad leg. He leaned against the fender, shaking. "You think killing yourself fixes this?" I asked. "You think leaving your daughter with a suicide note is an act of love? That is the coward's way out, Terrence. That is the Victoria way. Run away when it gets hard. I am not you," he cried. "I am not strong like you. I tried to be a big man and I almost got my daughter killed. I built a life on lies and it collapsed. I have nothing. I am 40 years old and I have nothing. You have nothing, because you built your house on sand," I said. "You built your life on the approval of a woman who hated you. You built it on credit cards and leased cars and fake titles. Of course it collapsed." I grabbed his jacket and pulled him toward the door. "Come with me." "Where are we going?" he asked, wiping his face. "I am going to show you where you are going to start over," I said. I drove him through the sleeping city. We did not go to the port. We did not go to the warehouse. We went to the plot of land adjacent to the terminal, the famous 5 acres, the land Victoria had tried to steal, the land Sterling had killed for, the land that was supposedly worth $15 million. I pulled up to the chain-link fence. I turned off the headlights. "Look," I said. Terrence looked out the window. The moon was bright enough to illuminate the field. He expected to see a construction site. He expected to see the foundations of a massive warehouse or a hotel complex. He expected to see the $15 million investment. Instead, he saw trees. He saw winding paths paved with cobblestones. He saw a playground with modern equipment. He saw benches and flower beds. And in the center he saw a modest stone archway with a sign etched in bronze. The Coretta Freeman Community Garden. Terrence looked at me confused. "It is a park," he said. "It is a park," I confirmed. "But the appraisal," he stammered. "The developers, the millions. You could have sold this. You could have retired in a palace." I looked at the green space. I saw the future. "I do not need a palace, son," I said. "I have a home. And I do not need $15 million in the bank. I have enough." I pointed at the land. "Sterling wanted to pave this over," I said. "He wanted to put concrete and steel here. He wanted more money. Victoria wanted to sell it to buy jewelry and status. They saw a price tag. I saw a legacy." I turned to Terrence. "This is what happens when you build on rock," I said. "You build something that lasts. You build something that gives back. You build something that makes your community better, not just your wallet fatter." Terrence looked at the park. He saw the swings where his daughter would play. He saw the benches where old men would play chess. "You gave it away," he whispered. "I invested it," I corrected him. "In people, in memory, in dignity." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You want to die because you lost your fake life," I said. "Good. Let it die. Let the vice president of sales die. Let the husband of Victoria die. Bury them here. And then you start digging." "Digging?" he asked. "I fired the landscape crew yesterday," I said. "I need a groundskeeper. I need someone to mow the grass, someone to paint the benches, someone to open the gates in the morning and close them at night. It pays minimum wage. It is hard work. It is humble work." I looked him in the eye. "Do you want the job?" Terrence looked at his hands. The hands that had never done a day of manual labor in his life. The hands that had signed fraudulent loans. "You want me to cut grass?" he asked. "I want you to learn what it means to sweat for $1, I said. "I want you to learn that there is no shame in dirt, only in lies. I want you to build yourself back up from the ground, son. Literally." Terrence looked at the park again. He took a deep breath. He looked at me. "When do I start?" he asked. 6 a.m., I said. "Do not be late." 6 months later, the sun was setting over our back porch. The air smelled of charcoal and barbecue sauce. Coretta was in the kitchen laughing at something on the radio. I sat at the head of the picnic table. Terrence was manning the grill. He looked different. He had lost the soft look of the office. His arms were tan and muscled. He walked with a limp, but he stood tall. He was wearing work boots and jeans stained with grass. He looked like a freeman. Maya was running around the yard chasing fireflies. She was laughing. It was a pure, unburdened sound. She had healed faster than any of us. Children are resilient when they are loved. "Dinner is ready," Terrence called out, placing a platter of ribs on the table. We sat down. We held hands. We said grace. It was a simple meal. Cornbread, collard greens, ribs, and sweet tea. It cost maybe $20 to make, but it tasted better than any $500 dinner at the Gilded Garden. After we ate, Maya climbed onto my lap. She looked at me with big, curious eyes. "Grandpa," she said, "do you still have the magic key?" "The magic key?" I asked, smiling. "The black card," she said. "The one that opened the big gate. Mommy said it was magic. She said it could buy anything in the world." I stopped smiling. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the titanium card. It was scratched now, worn from being in my pocket next to my keys. It did not look like magic. It looked like metal. I held it up. The last rays of the sun caught the chip. "It is not magic, Maya," I said. "It is just a tool, like a hammer or a shovel." I took her small hand. I placed the card in her palm. It was heavy for her. "You keep it," I said. Coretta looked up from her plate surprised. Terrence stopped eating. "Dad," Terrence said, "that is the access key to the entire holding company. That is the empire." "I know," I said. I looked at Maya. "Listen to me, baby girl," I said, my voice serious. "This card can open gates. It can buy big houses. It can make people bow to you. But it cannot make you important." Maya frowned, looking at the black metal. "Why not?" she asked. "Because you are important. Because you are, Maya," I said. "You are important because you are kind, because you are smart, because you are loved. This card is just metal. If you lose it, you are still Maya. If you have it, you are still Maya. Do not ever let a piece of metal tell you who you are, and do not ever let anyone treat you like you are nothing just because you do not have one. I closed her fingers over the card. Keep it safe, I said. Use it when you are older. Use it to build parks. Use it to help people. But never use it to show off. Do you understand? Yes, Grandpa, she whispered. She hopped off my lap and ran to show her father. Terrence looked at the card in his daughter's hand. He looked at me. He nodded. He understood. The card was not the legacy. The lesson was the legacy. The sun dipped below the horizon. The porch lights flickered on. I sat back in my chair and watched my family. We were battered. We were scarred. We had lost a lot. But we had found something that Victoria and Sterling and all the people like them would never understand. We had found the truth. And as I took a sip of my sweet tea, I realized that for the first time in a long time the gate was open, but I did not need to leave. I was exactly where I belonged. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about the power of money, but the power of truth. Victoria and Sterling believed that worth was measured in assets, and that people were simply obstacles to be removed. They underestimated the strength of quiet dignity and the loyalty of real family. My son had to lose everything to find himself proving that sometimes rock bottom is the solid foundation you need to rebuild your life. True legacy isn't the millions you leave behind in a trust fund. It is the integrity you instill in the generation that follows. Wealth can open gates, but only character can keep you inside. If you believe that respect must be earned and not bought, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories where justice always finds a way.